Chapter 1162. Meg looked at the broken knife in his hand, and then at the smug fat head fish. He was stunned, and couldn't help but ask in his heart, "System, did you practice the iron head technique with this lousy fish? Don't be impatient. This fat head fish is reared in Lake Karasana in the extreme north of the Norland continent. It's frozen all year round, and there's an extreme lack of oxygen underwater. In order to survive, these fat head fish use their heads to smash the ice surface every day. After smashing through the ice surface, they obtain oxygen. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, their heads are abnormally hard. Hence, they are also known as the icebreaker fish, a level 3 magic beast, the system explained. Why bother when it's a problem that can be solved by moving house? Meg pursed his lips. He looked at the broken knife in his hand, and said, "Where's the knife from yesterday? Seems like this gold-rimmed kitchen knife needs to be eliminated. The one I used last night was quite handy. Just give me one." Ding. The system's voice sounded. "The broken kitchen knife has triggered a hidden mission. As the god of cookery, you must have a peerless kitchen knife that belongs to you. Please head to Isen Castle, find the best knife forger, and forge your own god of cookery's knife." "That works." Meg raised his eyebrows, and then shook his head decisively. "System, I refuse this mission. I'm a chef. It's already the year 9012. Who would specially go to the dwarfs to find a master to customize a kitchen knife? As a professional assistant, is there a need for Dad to make a trip personally for a problem that can be solved with money? Tell me, how much was the kitchen knife from last night?" "The kitchen knife that Dad used previously is called Polu. It's a bone-cutting knife that this system specially designed for you. It's made of the highest grade of titanium alloy." The system's flattering voice stopped abruptly. It coughed twice, and then said seriously again, "Host, please respect this system. Don't use money to humiliate me. I'm an upright and principled system. For this mission, you must, double," Meg said calmly. "Must kiss, triple," Meg continued calmly. "Must go personally, quadruple. Must go personally, go, go, go. If you don't want to sell it, then forget it. I don't want to be a dead fish anymore," Mag said nonchalantly as he tossed the fat head fish back into the bathtub after drawing a perfect parabola in the air. "Wait." The system raised its voice and said with difficulty, "Host, you must go on this mission. The time limit is 3 days. Mission failure, host will be deemed as looking down on knives and will lose the right to use all the knives in the kitchen. Mission success, host will obtain a chance to temporarily restore his peak strength." Meg, who was about to turn around and leave, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He asked with some uncertainty in his heart, "System, are you saying that it'll be like the last time, and I'll directly recover to level 10? "Yes, it will take 10 minutes to restore this body to its peak state," the system said confidently. "Isn't 10 minutes too short? If this enemy talks a little more nonsense, I would have fainted in front of him before the fight even started. You know, some villains really talk a lot of nonsense." Meg's eyes lit up, but then he said with a troubled expression, "How about we add more? Villains talk a lot. You can't blame them for that. Otherwise, all the stories of superheroes would become tragedies." The system pondered for a while and said, "But what the host said is not unreasonable, so the system will consider adding another 5 minutes. 15 minutes. Meg thought for a while and nodded. "Okay, I'll accept this mission." Looking at the 3-day countdown that appeared in his mind, Meg began to make the kanji with pork and century egg. When the kanji was almost ready, Anna came down from upstairs and walked into the kitchen. She looked at Meg and said, "Uncle Meg, let me help you." "Anna, don't wake up so early in the future. Sleep more. It's time for you to grow taller." Meg looked at Anna and smiled. "It's okay. I've slept enough. Uncle Meg woke up earlier than me." Anna shook her head and opened the cupboard. She carefully took out a pile of big bowls and walked out of the kitchen. Meg looked at Anna's small back. This little girl was good at everything, but she was too sensible. So sensible that it made one's heart ache. At 6:30, Meg opened the door on time and took the big pot out. Then, with Anna's help, he distributed the kanji with pork and century egg to the cleaners. Seeing that everyone was almost done eating, Meg said loudly, I have something to tell everyone. I'm going out today and might be gone for 2 or 3 days. So for the next 2 days, everyone needs to bring their own breakfast. I'm telling everyone in advance. I hope everyone doesn't forget. Mr. Meg, don't worry. We'll take care of it ourselves. Old Jack said with a smile. The other cleaners mostly agreed. Didn't you say that we have food every day? Why is it gone after 2 days? Elton muttered. He drank a big mouthful of kanji and was a little dissatisfied. This kanji was delicious and free. Usually, he would starve every morning. Now, he had to stop eating after 2 days. He looked at Mag and rolled his eyes. He stood up with a chuckle and said to Mag, Mr. Mag, we won't have any breakfast after you go out. Why don't we do this? I heard that your kanji with pork and century egg is selling for 200 copper coins a bowl, so you can give each of us 400 copper coins for the next 2 days so that we can have our own breakfast. This way, you'll be paying the same price and we'll be able to eat a hot breakfast. Isn't this problem solved? Hearing 400 copper coins, many of the cleaners raised their heads. That was almost a month's worth of their salary. Although they felt that Elton's way of doing things was a little wrong, after thinking about it carefully, he didn't seem to be wrong. That was 400 copper coins. If they could get it, they could buy a lot of meat. Meg looked at Elton and suddenly laughed. This guy's level of shamelessness was worse than he thought. Elton, you rotten old man, you're very bad. Old Jack stood up abruptly and pointed at Elton angrily as he scolded, Mr. Mag is kind enough to make us breakfast for free. He even woke up early on his rest day just to fulfill a promise. What does he want from you? To pee on your hands or not bathe? Now that he has something to do and has to go out, you're good. Who do you think you are to have the face to ask him for 400 copper coins for breakfast? If you're so capable, why don't you use your face to sweep the floor? Even if you don't want your face, we still do. We can't make such a request. Sitting with someone like you and even drinking this bowl of kanji, I feel sorry for Mr. Meg. Yes, Mr. Meg is a great person. Don't worry and go out. We'll take care of our own breakfast. Many of the cleaners echoed. The cleaners who had been tempted earlier all blushed and lowered their heads in shame. Damn old man, you're ruining my plans again. Elton looked at old Jack sinisterly. Seeing that everyone's thoughts had been beaten back by old Jack's words and that he had become the target of public criticism, he chuckled and looked at Meg. I was just saying it casually. It was just a joke. Mr. Mac, don't take it to heart. It's all right. From tomorrow onwards, you don't have to come. Meg smiled at Elton. This isn't a joke. Chapter 1163. Elton was stunned. His eyes revealed a trace of panic. He swallowed his saliva and said, What? What do you mean you don't need to come anymore? It's very simple. From tomorrow onwards, Mammis will no longer provide you with breakfast. Meg looked at Elton with a hint of mockery in his smile. I won't serve you anymore. Elton's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly looked at Meg with a pleading expression and said, Mr. Meg, I was just joking just now. Please don't take it seriously. I promise I won't joke around in the future. Look at how cold the weather is. If I don't eat a hot breakfast, I will freeze to death this winter. Please take pity on me. Anna looked at Elton and then looked at Meg. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. The other cleaners also looked at Meg. Elton had indeed gone overboard. However, they didn't know how Mr. Meg would deal with this matter. I'm sorry. My kindness is limited. I only share it with people I want to share it with. As for you, you're clearly not one of those people. You've already been blacklisted by the restaurant. From now on, my restaurant won't serve you anymore, Mag said in an indifferent voice. There was no room for negotiation. Elton looked at Meg. Seeing that he had no intention of negotiating or taking a step back, it was obvious that he had decided not to give him any more porridge. He was so angry that he threw the big bowl in his hand onto the ground. It smashed into smithereens. He pointed at Meg and scolded jokingly, You hypocrite. You only gave us some porridge for the sake of becoming a scholar. Now you are deliberately finding fault with me and not letting me eat. I will expose your true colors and let everyone know what kind of person you are. I will report you to the city lord. Mag glanced at the smashed bowl on the ground and raised his eyebrows. This fellow was really a piece of shit who wouldn't listen to anything. Elton looked at Mag with a hint of smugness in his eyes. These rich people valued reputation and face the most, especially for a restaurant owner like Mag. If his reputation was tarnished, it would be difficult for him to do business in the future. He would definitely give in to him, and then he could extort a sum of money from him. Then, he would be able to live comfortably for the next few months. Old Jack wanted to say something but was pulled back by the old lady. She whispered, "Mr. Meg can settle it himself. Don't blindly interfere. He is not someone Elton can extort." Mag looked up at Elton and curled his lips. Smiling, he said, "You can sue me wherever you want. That's your freedom. Of course, I will hold you responsible for all the slander and accusations. I have money and time, so I'm not afraid of trouble at all." Elton was stunned. He did not expect Meg to be so stubborn. He flew into a rage out of humiliation, and said, "All right, I will go to the city lord's castle to report you." After saying that, he turned to leave. "Hold on. You can go and report me, but you have to compensate me for this bowl that you purposely smashed first. This is a high-quality porcelain bowl from the East. 400 copper coins for one." Meg stopped Elton and pointed at the broken bowl on the ground. 400 copper coins. Elton's eyes widened. He looked at the broken bowl on the ground, and then at Meg. He angrily said, You are extorting me." "Extorting?" Meg laughed. His gaze turned cold, and he raised his voice. "You are picking a quarrel and deliberately destroying other people's property. According to Chaos City's laws, you have to compensate the other party according to the price and bear the corresponding responsibility." I. Elton's gaze was a little panicked. How would he know about the law? He also did not expect Meg to go head-on with him without any intention of backing down. His monthly salary was only 600 copper coins, and he had spent it all on drinking and gambling within a few days. He still owed quite a lot of money. Where would he find 600 copper coins to compensate Meg? "I won't stoop to your level." Elton swung his sleeves, picked up his broom, and turned to leave. "Hey, dirty grandpa. You have to pay for the things you broke. Otherwise, my little fireball will not let you off so easily." Amy's crisp voice sounded from behind. Amy, who had woken up at some point, was standing at the door with a little fireball dancing in her hand. Elton turned back to look at the little fireball in Amy's hand, and his expression changed drastically. He picked up his broom and ran as he shouted, "Someone hit someone. Someone hit a cleaner. Hit someone." He ran away. "Looks like he's not going to pay. What a terrible choice," Amy mumbled to herself. Remi muttered and then pointed at Elton. A small fireball flew out and chased after Elton. A messy old man carrying a broom and a jumping red fireball chased each other crazily in the Aiden Square, maintaining a distance of about half a meter. "Amy, will he be okay?" Meg turned back to ask Amy. "Don't worry, father. He won't die," Amy assured him. Boom. There was an explosion, and a small mushroom cloud rose in the distance, accompanied by a shrill scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Elton, who was covered in flames, jumped into the cold fountain, and the flames were extinguished. Although he wasn't scalded, the clothes on his body had been burned away by the fire, and the water in the fountain quickly turned black. He shivered and curled up in the water. He didn't know whether to get up or stay down. He was so cold that tears were streaming down his face. What a sin. If I knew this would happen, I would have eaten the free breakfast. Now, I have no breakfast and no clothes. How am I going to survive this winter? When the cleaners saw this scene, they all hugged the big bowls in their hands tightly. These bowls cost 400 copper coins. If one of them was broken, they would have worked for nothing this month. However, no one really sympathized with Elton. Everyone knew what kind of person that guy was. He was always sneaky and didn't sweep the floor properly. His hands and feet were dirty. Now that he had set his sights on Mr. Meg, not only did he not succeed, but he was also punished. He deserved it. Mr. Meg and the little girl are really good. This time, they have completely controlled Elton, old Jack said to the old lady with a smile. Uncle Meg and Amy are the best at dealing with bad people. Anna looked at Meg and Amy, and thought to herself, if it were me, I wouldn't know what to do just now. Meg smiled and pinched Amy's face. Then, he looked at the cleaners and said, everyone, continue eating. There's more in the pot when you're done. He took a broom and swept away the broken pieces of the porcelain bowls on the floor, then threw them into the trash can. He wasn't a saint, so he wouldn't spoil anyone. After breakfast, Meg packed up his things, wrote a notice board, and hung it at the door. Uncle Meg, are you going on a trip? Anna looked at the notice board and asked curiously. Chapter 1164. Trip. Gina stood at the side with a puzzled expression. She didn't quite understand the meaning of the word. Yes, Amy and I are going out. Meg nodded. He turned to look at Anna with a smile, and said, Anna, do you want to come along? Will it be inconvenient? Anna thought to herself worriedly. She shook her head, and said, it's okay. I'll just go to Big Sister Mia's ice cream shop. I see. Meg didn't force her. This trip to the dwarfs wasn't really a trip, and he didn't know if they would encounter any danger. He then looked at Gina, and said in the mermaid language, Gina, we're going out for 2 to 3 days. If you're bored, you can go back to Lantiste or find MIA and the rest to play. Gina shook her head. Lantiste is too far. I don't want to trouble Elizabeth. I'll just go to the ice cream shop with Anna. All right. Meg nodded. It was indeed quite troublesome to go to the boundless sea realm without a flying steed. Father, where are we going to play? Amy asked curiously as she hugged Ugly Duckling. We're going to a place very far away. Wait for me for a while. I need to get something. Meg turned and went into the restaurant. He went into the kitchen and scooped up the fat head fish that he had slashed in the morning and stuffed it into a small bucket. Then, he took out a set of ingredients for steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers from the fridge. He lowered his head to look at the fat head fish swimming leisurely in the bucket, and said, Don't think that I can't deal with you. I'll eat you up on the way. I don't have a cleaver, but I have a sword. The fat head fish glared, and immediately jumped crazily in the bucket. Meg closed the lid of the bucket. This was a special bucket that he had bought from the system. Even a third-tier magical beast like him wouldn't be able to open it. He was going against this fat head fish. Let's go. We'll go to the ice cream shop first. I have something to tell them, too. Meg went out and locked the door. He held Anna with his left hand and Amy with his right hand, and walked towards the ice cream shop. Gina looked around and then jogged forward. She held Amy's little hand and smiled brightly. Meg told MIA and the others that he had to go out for a while and would only be back in 2 or 3 days. Before he came back, the restaurant would be temporarily closed. After that, he left with Amy. After leaving the city, Meg brought Amy up the mountain to find Azi. When they were halfway up the mountain, Meg whistled. Azi quickly flew out of the cave and let out a cry of surprise. She bent down and rushed towards Meg and the others. Ugly Duckling, which was lying comfortably in Amy's arms, immediately opened its eyes. It looked up, only to discover a gargantuan griffin swooping down toward them. It immediately jumped out of Amy's arms and hid behind her, trembling uncontrollably. RZ landed in front of Meg and stuck its head out to rub against Meg's hand. When it saw Amy reach out her hand, it instinctively shrunk its head back. Seeing her stiff expression, it hurriedly stuck its head out and allowed her to rub it. "Hello, little RZ," Amy said with a smile. She wasn't frightened by the purple-striped griffin's huge size at all. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling meowed weakly as if it wanted to make its presence known. RZ was stunned when it heard the voice. Then, it stretched its neck and turned behind Amy. It stung Ugly Duckling, who was hiding behind Amy, and its eyes lit up instantly. Meow. Ugly Duckling was shocked. It hugged Amy's leg and buried its head in her shoe. It didn't dare to raise its head and curled into a ball. "Ugly Duckling, you're really a coward," Amy said disdainfully. RZ lowered its head slowly, and then blew at Ugly Duckling. Whoosh tilde as if there was a gust of wind, Ugly Duckling rolled back twice and sat on the ground. It looked at the huge head that stuck out in front of it with a dumbfounded expression. The furry head had dazzling purple gold hair, and it was very majestic. Ugly Duckling's eyes darted around, and it didn't dare to move. It looked at Amy for help. RZ moved closer to Ugly Duckling and sniffed it with a puzzled expression. It walked to the other side and sniffed it again. Then, it blew at Ugly Duckling again. Ugly Duckling turned 2 times in the other direction with its white belly facing up. It rolled its eyes and stuck out its tongue. It didn't move and started to play dead. Meg, who was about to stop RZ from hurting Ugly Duckling, stopped what he was doing and looked at RZ, who was sizing up Ugly Duckling, with interest. What exactly was Ugly Duckling? There were so many customers in the restaurant, but no one had recognized it until now. This really made him curious. RZ was a 10th-tier purple-striped griffin. It usually scoffed at ordinary magical beasts and didn't even look them in the eye. But now, it was so interested in Ugly Duckling. This really surprised him. Could it be that Ugly Duckling was also the descendant of some super magical beast? RZ moved closer to Ugly Duckling, which was playing dead, and suddenly revealed its sinister teeth. Meow. Ugly Duckling opened its eyes in shock. It raised its paw and smacked RZ's head. Then, it jumped back into Amy's arms and buried its head in her arms, leaving only half of its butt outside. Cake. Ugly Duckling only left 3 shallow white marks on RZ's head, which made RZ laugh hysterically. Amy poked Ugly Duckling's fat butt with a disdainful look, and said, "See, little RZ is laughing at you. You're fat and cowardly. RZ, here's some meat for you." Meg took out a big piece of beef from his backpack with a smile, and threw it into the air casually. RZ jumped up and caught it with its mouth. It chewed and swallowed it, and landed in front of Meg, wagging its tail vigorously at him. "I only brought 1 piece. Catch it yourself on the way later, and I'll roast it for you." Meg shook his head with a smile and patted its head. He carried Amy and jumped onto the griffin's back, and said, "RZ, let's go to Isen Castle. Don't be discovered on the way." Howl. RZ let out a long howl. It flapped its wings and flew towards the west. Meow. Ugly Duckling poked its head out of Amy's arms and looked down. Its eyes immediately rolled around, and it fainted in Amy's arms, making RZ laugh at it again. On the way, RZ caught a big goat, and Meg roasted it on the spot. He cut 2 pieces for his and Amy's lunch, and gave the rest to RZ as a reward. After eating the roasted goat, RZ continued to fly towards the west with Meg and Amy on its back. Not long after, an eerie iron castle built between the mountains appeared in Meg's vision. Black steel was embedded between the cliffs, and connected to the caves, forming a mountain of china. This was Isen Castle, a kingdom of the dwarfs, and also the forging capital of the Norland continent. RZ stopped in a valley not far from Isen Castle. Meg carried Amy and jumped to the ground. He patted RZ's head, and said, "RZ, play around here. Don't be discovered by others. We'll only stay here for 3 days at most." RZ nodded, and its gaze landed on Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms. "Although Ugly Duckling is a little stupid, it's mine. Little RZ, you can't have any ideas about it," Amy said sternly. Chapter 1165. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was originally a little scared, immediately meowed at RZ. It even shook its head and bared its teeth, looking very smug. Phew, RZ exhaled a little angrily, but when it saw Amy, it shrunk its head and didn't dare to be rash. "However, when it grows up, I can consider giving you some," Amy said after some thought. "But, it can't be too much." Meow. Ugly Duckling's eyes widened as if it realized that things weren't that simple. Howl. RZ seemed to have understood Amy's words. It raised its head and meowed happily as it stared at Ugly Duckling expectantly. "Alright, let's go to Isen Castle first. Although it doesn't look far, we still have to find the best blacksmith there." Meg waved to RZ, and then held Amy's little hand as they walked along the valley in the direction of Isen Castle. RZ flapped its wings and flew away from the valley that people often passed by. Isen Castle didn't look far in the sky, but in order to prevent being discovered, Ozzy still stopped several kilometers away. It would still take a lot of time to walk all the way there. Amy was tired after walking for a short while. Meg carried her, threw Ugly Duckling into the travel bag behind him, and walked towards the steel castle between the mountains in the distance. Just as Meg was considering whether to rent a bicycle from the system, there was the sound of hooves and wheels behind him. Meg walked to the side of the road and prepared to give way, but the carriage stopped beside him. "Hey, are you going to Isen Castle? Seeing that you have a child with you, do you need us to give you a ride?" In the first carriage, a middle-aged man dressed like a merchant looked at Meg and asked. His gaze lingered on Amy, who had already fallen asleep in Meg's arms, for a while. In such cold weather, what was this guy thinking? He actually brought his child out for a walk. If they walked to Isen Castle, the child would probably be frozen to death. Meg looked at the caravan to find that there were a dozen or so horse-drawn carriages, all of which were filled to the brim with goods. The coachmen were all humans, and it appeared that they were merchants from Rodu. The chubby middle-aged man who was greeting them was most likely the owner of this caravan. He had dark skin, and appeared to be quite friendly. Thus, Tang Wulin smiled, and said, "If it's possible, I'll have to trouble you." "All right, come on up. There's charcoal burning in the carriage, so it's warm. Don't let the children catch a cold." Godalla laughed heartily as he lifted the heavy curtains and gestured for Meg and the others to enter the carriage. Meg carried Amy into the carriage, and the warm air blew against their faces, completely isolating them from the cold. The interior of the carriage was very spacious, and there was even a simple bed that could be unfolded near the back. It should be where this merchant usually slept. There was a metal basin in the middle of the carriage with charcoal burning inside. There was a small metal rack above the brazier, and a chicken was being roasted on it. The carriage was already filled with the aroma of roasted chicken. Roasted chicken? As soon as Meg sat down, Amy woke up from the smell. She poked her head out of Meg's arms, and stared at the roasted chicken on the rack. "This is not our roasted chicken," Meg said with a helpless smile. The little fellow really didn't forget to roast chicken even when she was sleeping. "It's not ours." Remi looked left and right. Why did he come to this place when he only slept for a while? She looked at Meg strangely, and asked, "Father, have we arrived?" "Not yet. This kind uncle said he was willing to give us a ride, so we got on his carriage." Meg shook his head. "Oh." Amy nodded thoughtfully. Then she looked up at Godalla and smiled sweetly. "Uncle, is this roasted chicken yours? Can I have a small bite? The little girl is so cute." Godalla looked at Amy, and his eyes lit up. He smiled as he picked up the roasted chicken, and handed it to Amy. "Eat. You can have even 2 bites. Amy, don't simply eat other people's food. Uncle probably hasn't eaten yet." Meg shook his head as he looked at Amy, who was about to reach out to take the roasted chicken. It's okay. How much can a child eat in 1 or 2 bites? Let her eat first. I'll eat the rest." Godalla smiled and waved his hand. The little girl looked crystal clear, and was really likable. It was okay to let her have 1 or 2 bites first. "Father, look. Even Uncle said it's okay." Amy retracted her hand and looked at the roasted chicken, then at Meg. "This?" Meg pondered for a while. Seeing that Godalla really didn't mind, he nodded, and reminded her again, "You can only have 1 bite." "Okay." Amy nodded happily. Then she reached out to pluck a big drumstick from the roasted chicken. She opened her mouth wide and stuffed the whole drumstick into her mouth. She chewed and spat out the whole drumstick bone, then swallowed it. She nodded in satisfaction. Although it's not as good as Father's roasted chicken, it's still very delicious. "This?" Godalla stared blankly at Remi, who ate the drumstick in 1 bite. He only regained his senses after a while. How could such a young girl eat a drumstick in 1 bite? Even he couldn't do that. Besides, he really hadn't had his lunch yet. This roasted chicken that he had roasted for more than an hour was the lunch he had specially prepared for himself. He would be lying if he said he didn't feel the pinch at all after eating a fat drumstick in 1 bite just like that. "Uncle, can I have another bite?" Amy looked at Godalla with a harmless smile. Looking at this kitten-like cute smile, Who would believe that she had just eaten a whole drumstick in one bite? Although he was the one who said that just now, according to the way she was eating, if she took another bite, he would only be able to chew on the bones. Godala took the roasted chicken from Amy's hands, and nodded seriously. I think your father is right. Children shouldn't eat too much when they're on the bus. Otherwise, they'll feel uncomfortable on the bus. Meg touched his nose and held back his laughter. Sigh, it's just a small bite. Amy looked away from the roasted chicken reluctantly. She took out Ugly Duckling from the bag, hugged it, and leaned against Meg. She immediately closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Godala was stunned as he looked at Amy, who fell asleep instantly. He raised his head and gave Meg a thumbs up. Your daughter is really a genius. You flatter me. Meg turned his body slightly to let Amy lean on him more comfortably. Oh, yes. I'm Godala, a merchant from Rodu. Where are you from? What are you going to Isen Castle for? Godala asked Meg curiously. This father-daughter pair's attire and salutation didn't look like merchants or wanderers. Instead, they looked like rich people who were out for a stroll. They even brought along a strange-colored kitten. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1166. I'm Meg, and this is my daughter, Amy. We came from Chaos City. The flying steed we took had some problems, and left us behind before we reached Isen Castle. Hence, we could only walk there, Meg replied with a smile. It was a half-truth. Amy's reputation was out there now, and she might have acquaintances in Isen Castle. If he were to lie completely, it might attract suspicion and attention. Hence, he might as well be honest. After all, his purpose of coming here was to forge a good cleaver. Godala glanced at Meg in surprise. Being able to take a flying steed from Chaos City to Isen Castle meant that this pair of father and daughter were not wanderers, but rather wealthy people. It was just that their luck was not very good. He smiled, and said, I see. Then your luck is really bad. If you didn't meet me, you would have to walk for 2 to 3 hours in such cold weather. Why did you come all the way to Isen Castle? I'm a chef. I'm here to find the best blacksmith to forge a suitable cleaver for me. I wonder if Mr. Godala knows who the best blacksmith in Isen Castle is. Where can I find him? Meg asked. I've been traveling between Rodu and Isen Castle for over 30 years. I spend 3 months in Isen Castle every year. Of course, I know that place like the back of my hand. Godala looked confident, but then he looked at Meg strangely. Although I've never been to Chaos City, I've heard from many of my peers that there are all kinds of races in Chaos City. It shouldn't be difficult to find a dwarf blacksmith to forge a cleaver for you, right? Why did you come all the way to Isen Castle? And you even want to find the best blacksmith? Isn't this too much? Meg looked at Godala, who was looking at him as if he was an idiot, and calmly said, The cleaver forged by the blacksmiths in Chaos City can't meet my requirements. Can't meet your requirements? Is there such a high requirement for a kitchen knife? Godala was still confused. He tore open a drumstick and started eating. He usually used a small knife that he had brought with him when he was hunting on the road. He had bought it from a roadside stall in Isen Castle for 3 copper coins. He had used it for more than 10 years without any problems, unlike Meg, who was so particular about it. Some ingredients can't be cut with a normal kitchen knife, so we can only come to Eisenberg to find the best blacksmith to make the best kitchen knife, Meg said. There's something that a kitchen knife can't cut open? Don't tell me you're a magical beast. Godala was slightly taken aback. Having been a merchant for so many years, he had seen plenty of magical beasts. However, because the caravans would usually have 1 or 2 knights accompanying them as guards, there had never been any mishaps when they encountered low-level magical beasts. Magic beasts did have some tough bones. Even the Death Knight's special longsword might not be able to cut them open. Yes. Meg nodded, and continued, Mr. Godala, please tell me about the great blacksmiths in Isen Castle. My purpose for this trip is to bring back the best kitchen knife. It will take more time to ask when we reach Isen Castle later. All right, then I'll tell you. Godala saw that Mag had already made up his mind, so he didn't probe further. If we were to talk about the most famous blacksmith in Isen Castle, it would naturally be the legendary blacksmith Master Rom, who was already 400 years old, had forged countless world-renowned weapons, and left his name on the Norland continent. Among them, the most famous one would be Lord Alex's Tian-Du sword. 300 years ago, Master Rome forged the Tian-Du sword for the ancestor of the Alex family. Later on, that ancestor guarded the northwest of the empire, and made great contributions, continuing the prosperous Alex family. Many years later, the Alex family's castle was breached by the allied army of the demons and orcs. The family was annihilated, and almost no one survived. 300 years later, Lord Alex appeared with the Tian-Du sword, and became the most powerful person in the Roth Empire's military. He was like a god descending from the heavens, and suppressed all the experts on the Norland continent. He slayed dragons and demons, and was hailed as the #1 knight. The Tian-Du sword became famous again, and was hailed as the #1 sword in the world. Meg was a little surprised that the master who forged the Tian-Du sword was still alive. He looked at Godalla, whose eyes lit up at the mention of Alex, and asked with a smile, "Does Mr. Godalla like Alex a lot?" "Of course. Is there anyone in the Roth Empire who doesn't like Lord Alex? He is the pride of our empire, and the first knight to be hailed as a dragon slayer. That was him. It was also from him that the people of the Roth Empire no longer feared giant dragons." Godalla looked at Meg with a matter-of-fact expression, and then shook his head disinterestedly. "Forget it. You won't understand even if I explain it to a chef like you. Anyway, the things that Lord Alex does are not something you can imagine." "All right. Then continue to talk about that Master Rome." Meg held back his laughter, and nodded. Apart from the Tian-Du sword, this Master Rome has many other famous works. Those who can reserve a weapon from him are all the most powerful people in the various races. Ordinary people don't even have the right to queue, Godalla lamented. "In that case, this Master Rome basically represents the highest standard of blacksmiths in Isen Castle, right?" Meg said thoughtfully. "That's right. Go and ask around. Who dares to say that their standard is higher than Master Rome?" Godalla nodded. He looked at Meg, and advised, "You, don't even think about Master Rome. You won't even be able to queue up. Moreover, I heard that Master Rome's temper has been getting worse these few years. He has changed a few batches of workers in the shop, and customers who come without an appointment are all chased out by him directly. You'd better not go and get yourself into trouble." "I'm afraid I can only go and get myself into trouble if I want to forge the best cleaver." Meg smiled, and said, "I wonder if Mr. Godalla can tell me the location of Master Rome's workshop." "Sigh, I've already said that Master Rome will never succeed. He makes peerless weapons, how can he forge a cleaver for you? If you go to him like this, you'll definitely be chased out by his disciples. If you want to find a powerful blacksmith, I can introduce you to a few good blacksmiths who are easy to talk to and powerful." "Why do you have to ask for trouble?" Godalla looked at Meg with a puzzled expression. Meg could tell that Godalla meant well, but he still shook his head with a smile, and said, "Since I'm already in Isen Castle, there's no reason not to try. I'll ask Mr. Godalla to introduce me to other blacksmiths after I fail." "All right, we'll be passing by Master Rome's workshop later. I'll drop you off there." Godalla couldn't be bothered to persuade Meg further after seeing how stubborn he was. He'd naturally know if what he said was true after he suffered a little. Godalla and Meg talked about the rules and precautions of Isen Castle on the following journey. They had a pleasant conversation. "Mr. Meg, that's Master Rome's workshop." The carriage stopped at a street in Isen Castle. Godalla looked at Meg and reminded him seriously, "I'm staying at the Tam Inn at the end of this street. If you have any difficulties, you can come and find me. Remember, don't anger Master Tam, or it'll be very troublesome." Chapter 1167. Mag watched the caravan disappear into the distance. He was holding Amy's hand as he looked at the shabby blacksmith shop on the corner of the street. It didn't even have a signboard. It didn't feel like the best workshop in the world at all. Instead, it looked more like a shabby blacksmith shop on the street. Then, his gaze fell on the long line of more than 10 people at the door. There was a small door in the blacksmith shop. It was ajar, and he could hear sporadic clanking sounds coming from the door. The line was right outside the door. There were ferocious-looking demons, burly demons, human knights in armor, elves with cold expressions, and goblins with protruding mouths and monkey-like cheeks. They all stood in the line with some hostility, and all of them exuded the aura of powerhouses. Meg glanced at them. Even the weakest elf had the strength of a 7th-tier powerhouse. The rest were mostly 8th-tier and 9th-tier powerhouses. This scene made Meg feel a sense of familiarity. "Father, are they waiting in line to eat?" Amy asked curiously as she looked at the line. "No, they should be waiting to forge weapons. Let's join the line." Meg shook his head and held Amy's hand as they walked to the back of the line. Meg joined the line, and immediately attracted the attention of all the customers in front of him. There was a hint of hostility in their scrutinizing gazes. After seeing that Meg was just an ordinary person, there was a hint of mockery in their eyes. "I say, what are you doing here? Are you bringing your child out to play? Do you know where this place is?" The demon in front of Meg turned around and looked at Meg with an unfriendly expression. His gaze lingered on Amy for a while, and he made a scary face at her. "Ha ha ha, uncle, your expression is so funny." Amy was not frightened at all. Instead, she laughed happily. "Funny?" Hardeng was stunned. His appearance was enough to make even demon children cry on the spot, let alone ordinary human children. This little brat actually said that he was funny. Wasn't this an insult to his looks? "This should be Master Rome's workshop, right? I'm here to ask him to forge a kitchen knife for me," Meg said calmly as he shielded Amy behind him. Even with his current strength, he could easily kill a 7th-grade demon. In other words, he had the strength to fight any one of them. He, who had broken through to the 8th level, had yet to fight with anyone. Kitchen knife. Hardeng was stunned. He looked at Meg in disbelief. "You mean the kitchen knife you humans use to cut ingredients?" Everyone in the group also had a look of surprise on their faces. There was even a faint trace of anger. They lined up here every day in the hopes that Master Rome would one day be kind enough to forge a unique weapon for them so that they could become renowned powerhouses on the Norland continent. And this guy actually wanted Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for him? Wasn't this an insult to the Master? It was precisely because of these unruly fellows who came to the Master every day to mess around that the Master was getting more and more annoyed with innocent visitors like them. "Millimeter, Meg replied calmly. "My father's cooking is really delicious." REMI didn't forget to add. Everyone stared at them. This father and daughter pair really didn't know their place at all. Hardeng was quite angry at first, but he couldn't flare up when he saw the cute little lowly. He pointed to the front, and said, "I say, if you want to forge a kitchen knife, you can go to any blacksmith shop. Why did you come to Master Rome's shop to mess around? See, there's a shop that specializes in making kitchen knives and hoes in front. Hurry up and go. Thank you for your kindness, but I have to find Master Rome to forge my kitchen knife." Meg shook his head. He couldn't be bothered with Hardeng anymore. He took out a water bottle from his bag and poured a cup for Amy. Then, he tilted his head back and drank 2 mouthfuls. "You." Hardeng still wanted to say something. At that moment, the half-closed wooden door suddenly opened, and a young man in his teens came out. He said with a sad face, "You guys should leave. Master Rome said that he won't see anyone today. Even if you wait until nightfall, he won't see you." Everyone in the line was instantly disheartened. "Little Master, is Master Rome in a bad mood again today?" the orc at the front of the line whispered. The young man looked back inside and whispered with a sad face, "Master has been in a bad mood for the past 2 years. You guys shouldn't come. Anyway, Master hasn't finished his work, so he definitely won't forge weapons for you guys." Everyone looked disappointed and began to disperse. Although they had experienced the same thing many times, it seemed like their hopes were getting dimmer and dimmer. "Sigh, looks like I can only come back tomorrow." Hardeng sighed. He was about to leave when he saw Mag putting away the kettle and walking to the front of the line. "Hey, why are you still walking to the front?" he asked in bewilderment. "Master Rome already said that he won't see any guests. If you guys leave, maybe he'll see me." Meg smiled. He only had 3 days. Although it seemed that Master Rome had a strange temper and wasn't easy to get along with, he still had to give it a try. Hardeng sneered. "Heh, do you really think you're good-looking? Master Rom has rejected many 10th-tier powerhouses' requests. You're just a kitchen knife, and you still want to ask him to help you? Let's not talk about anything else. You should know Alex, right? He was the one who rode on a griffin and flew in the sky. He could even slash 2 giant dragons while he was at it. His sword was made by Master Rom. You want to use the same kitchen knife as Alex?" The customers who hadn't walked far away also began to laugh as they looked at Mag with mockery. This fellow was really daydreaming. How could a chef ask Master Rom to forge a cleaver for him? What a joke. How long has it been since Master Rome took a normal order? Meg didn't care about Hardeng's mockery and the others' mockery. Hardeng looked at Meg, who was calm and didn't seem angry at all. The mocking smile on his face disappeared. He thought for a while and said, "It's been more than a year. I heard that Master Rome was very kind. Although he didn't take many orders, he was very kind to his apprentices and customers. But in the past 2 years, his temper has become worse and worse. I heard that he has changed 3 batches of apprentices, and he doesn't treat customers well at all." Hardeng seemed to feel that he was being too kind to Meg. He put on a stern face again, and sneered. "Anyway, you're dreaming if you want Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for you. You might even be beaten up by his apprentices and thrown to another street. I hope to see you again tomorrow." Hardeng turned and left. The other customers left soon after. Meg tidied his clothes and walked forward with Amy. He looked at the waiter who was about to close the door, and said with a smile, "Young master, can you tell him that I'm a chef from Chaos City, and I want to ask Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for me?" Chapter 1168. A cleaver. The dwarf waiter was stunned for a moment. Although he had only followed Master Rom for half a year, he had to receive many customers who came because of his reputation. He had heard many strange requests, but this was the first time he had heard of a kitchen knife. "Yes." Meg nodded, and added, "It's the cleaver that chefs use to cut ingredients. Master Rome said that he won't see any customers today, and he won't accept any orders. Please go back." The clerk shook his head. This human chef probably didn't understand the situation. Usually, the customers who came to the master were all experts. They came to make weapons, but this human chef asked for a cleaver. "Please let him know," Meg insisted. The clerk looked at Meg's determined eyes, thought for a while, and nodded. "Okay, I'll let him know for you, but don't expect too much." "Thank you." Meg nodded. The clerk turned and went in. The inside of the weapon shop looked much more spacious than the outside, but there was no light. There were only 2 dim wall lamps, which made the interior look a little dim. A young blacksmith in his teens was standing in front of the stove, waving the heavy hammer in his hand, and hammering the red iron into a flat shape. A white-haired dwarf old man was sitting on an iron stool in front of the stove. The pipe in his mouth had burned out, and his eyes were staring at the dancing sparks in the stove. "Master Luo Mu." The shop assistant went forward and called out cautiously. The old man was stunned for a while before he looked up. His red nose was flat, and he frowned. He said impatiently, "What's the matter? Haven't those annoying guys left yet?" "No, they've already left. But there's a chef outside who says he's from Chaos City. He wants you to make a cleaver for him, so he asked me to let you know," the clerk said hurriedly. He stole a glance at the master's expression, and felt that he was going to be implicated by that guy at the door. A cleaver. Master Rome was obviously stunned for a moment. He seemed to have thought of something and raised his voice. "You mean, there's a guy outside who wants me to make a kitchen knife for him?" Cold sweat began to form on the young man's forehead. He suddenly regretted his decision to ask for a kitchen knife for that guy. He might lose the opportunity to continue working in Master Rome's workshop. However, Master Rome stared at him, so he had no choice but to nod. "Me. I started learning how to forge at the age of 5, and stopped making kitchen knives and hoes at the age of 8. In these 400 years, I can't even count the number of weapons I've made, and all of them are called divine weapons. Now, someone actually wants me to make a kitchen knife. Do you think I'm dying? Master Rom kicked over a metal rack at the side, and the metal rack that was filled with unfinished weapons fell to the ground with a loud thud. The blacksmith apprentice slowly put down the hammer in his hand and looked worriedly at the shop assistant. The shop assistant panicked and said in a trembling voice, I'll go get him to leave now. No need. Get out of here, all of you. Master Rome shouted angrily. Yes. The shop assistant and apprentice answered. They didn't dare to clean up the mess on the ground and hurried towards the door. Meg, who was standing at the door, could clearly hear the commotion inside through the half-closed door. He felt a little guilty when he saw the two shop assistants hurrying out and closing the door. You can go now. Master Rome won't see you. The shop assistant looked at Meg with a complicated expression, then left with the other shop assistant with a depressed expression. The two of them looked a little lonely. Father, why are they unhappy? Amy asked, puzzled. They were scolded by their master because of father, so they might lose their jobs. Meg looked at the two's backs and felt that he should find an opportunity to make it up to them. When the two disappeared at the end of the street, Meg withdrew his gaze and looked at the old workshop. System, do I really have to find Master Rome to forge this kitchen knife? Is it possible to change it to an advanced blacksmith? Meg asked in his mind. Master Rome is the #1 blacksmith in the world. His forging skills are unparalleled. Only a kitchen knife forged by him can achieve the effect of cutting through anything. It is also a good kitchen knife that will accompany the host for a lifetime. Therefore, the host must ask Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for you in order to complete the mission. The system replied. System, this mission is unreasonable. He looks down on the forging of a kitchen knife. This is an impossible mission. Meg objected. On the road to becoming the god of cookery, you will encounter all kinds of troubles. I hope the host can take the initiative to overcome them. Good luck. The system said encouragingly and then disappeared. Fuck. Mag rolled his eyes. He fell into deep thought as he stared at the tightly shut door. In the blacksmith shop, Rome looked at the mess on the ground and sighed deeply. He lay back in the chair and looked at the fire in a daze. He had never left this workshop in his life. At the age of 5, he learned forging from his father. At the age of 6, he was able to forge the best kitchen knife and hoe in Isen Castle. At the age of 8, he began to forge weapons. From then on, he was unstoppable. The Tiandu sword was forged for a knight who came from afar when he was 20 years old. It took him an entire year to forge the sword. As for the young knight, he held that sword and roamed the humans' northern territory with disdain. He established great meritorious deeds and killed many powerhouses. He also attracted the attention of the world and became a famous smithing master. In the following hundreds of years, weapons were forged from his hands and became the killing weapons in the hands of many powerhouses. His reputation became more and more famous. 10th-tier powerhouses lined up to ask him to forge weapons. The nobles of various races lowered their noble heads and begged him to forge a weapon. Even during the years of racial chaos, he still didn't leave his workshop. He immersed himself in forging, and gave those powerhouses one powerful weapon after another. He made a name for himself on the Norland continent, and also became the #1 blacksmith. He did not know what he wanted, but he enjoyed the feeling of being immersed in forging. He was even more obsessed with the feeling of accomplishment when he saw the divine weapons being forged. But 2 years ago, when he woke up one morning, he suddenly could not remember what he had done yesterday. He even forgot how many times he had hammered the sword, and how many processes he had gone through. It was unquestionably fatal for a blacksmith. He could no longer complete the forging of a weapon alone, but he was not willing to expose this to anyone. So, he started to become irritable. He chased away his most familiar disciple, stopped accepting new orders, and did not hand in a weapon for 2 years. His 400-year-old life seemed to be coming to an end. Rome knew this, but he was unwilling to admit it. He was willing to collapse on his forging table one day. He did not want to die in a daze like this. Chapter 1169. Borrow a knife. The soft voice woke Rome up from his thoughts. He glanced at the small window in the corner and realized that it was already dark. Who wants to borrow a knife? A little girl? Strange. Rome frowned and slowly stood up. He picked up the jug of wine and took a big gulp, then walked towards the door. Although he had gradually lost control of his emotions in the past 2 years, the older he got, the harder it was for him to refuse children. Rome opened the door and saw a little half-elf girl about 4 or 5 years old standing at the door. She looked like she was carved out of jade, and she was looking up at him. "Little girl, why are you knocking on the door?" Rome tried to keep his voice as low as possible, for fear of scaring the cute little girl. "Old Grandpa, can you lend me a knife? My father and I came from a very, very far place. We don't have a place to live or eat, so we can only cook for ourselves. But we forgot to bring a kitchen knife, and we can't even cut the big stupid fish open." Amy looked pitifully at Rome. Rome looked in the direction Amy was pointing. There was a fire in the open space opposite the forge, and a young human man was standing next to it. He was looking at them with a smile, and there was a big bag at his feet. "I don't have a kitchen knife here. Little girl, you can go somewhere else to borrow one." Rome shook his head. He wasn't lying. He really couldn't find a kitchen knife in his forge. But everyone else's forge is closed. "Old Grandpa, can you lend us a knife? As long as we can cut open that big stupid fish, we'll be fine." Remi looked at the pitch-black street and shook her little head. Meg, who was standing next to the fire, was also looking at Rome. The old dwarf still looked strong. His thick arms were almost as thick as an ordinary person's waist, which made him look like a square. His white hair and wrinkled face proved his age. Judging from the average lifespan of dwarfs of 400 years, this Master Rome was indeed very old. However, he looked quite kind when he was talking to Amy. He didn't look like he was yelling at the shop assistant just now. Rome looked around. The shops on the street were indeed closed. Dwarfs loved wine, and most of them went to the tavern to drink at night. It wasn't easy to find another place with people around to borrow a knife. Meg walked up and looked at Rome. "Hello, I'm Meg. My father and daughter came all the way from Chaos City to ask Master Rome to forge the world's best kitchen knife for us. Because of my reckless behavior earlier, I offended Master Rome and implicated the 2 little brothers. I'm sorry. And I apologize. And I hope you can forgive me. You're the guy who wanted me to forge a kitchen knife for you." Luo Mu frowned with anger on his face. He raised his voice and said, "I'm a weaponsmith. I only forge weapons for combat. I've never forged kitchen knives. Please go back. I won't forge a kitchen knife for a chef. Master Rome, as a chef, I think the battle between a chef and ingredients is better than the battle between a knight and a magic beast. No knight will peel off a magic beast's skin or split open the hardest bones in a battle just to find the most delicious part and present it to the diner," Meg said firmly as he looked at Rome. "Heh. A chef is just a chef. Do you want to fight a magic beast like a knight?" Rome sneered. He didn't agree with Meg's ridiculous point of view. "This is a 3rd-tier magic beast, fathead fish. I want to use it to make a delicious steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. I have 100 ways to kill it, but my kitchen knife can't split its head open. So, I brought it from Chaos City to Isen Castle to find a kitchen knife that can split its head open," Meg said as he took out the bucket and pointed at the fat head fish inside. Rome was stunned as he looked at the fat head fish that was banging its head against the lid of the bucket. Judging from the demon aura, this was indeed a 3rd-tier magic beast, and its big head that took up almost half of its body should be the hardest part of its body. Without a suitable weapon, it would not be an easy task to split open the head of such a magical beast. However, Rome looked at Meg with a frown, and said, "Isn't a fish just eating its flesh? I've never heard of anyone eating a fish head. Even if you split its head open, are you going to eat the things inside its head? A properly cooked fish head is much more delicious than the flesh. Wouldn't it be a pity to give up such a delicious dish?" Meg shook his head, and said to Rome, "Master Rome, why don't we make a bet? You lend me a knife to split open the head of this fat head fish, and I'll cook a dish with the fish head as the ingredient. You can taste it later. If you think it's delicious, you can make a kitchen knife for me. If you don't, I'll leave Isen Castle immediately. What do you think? Grandpa, my father's dishes are really super delicious. Amy looked at Rome, and then touched her stomach. She pitifully said, I'm so hungry tilde tilde meow tilde. Ugly duckling stared at the fat head fish in the bucket, and swallowed its saliva. Its eyes were already glowing green. That fat head fish seemed to have sensed a terrifying threat, and stopped all its movements. It slowly turned around to look at Ugly Duckling, and then dodged to the other side of the bucket. It looked at Ugly Duckling in horror. A bet. A hint of hesitation appeared on Rome's face. He looked at the fat head fish in the bucket, and then at the expectant Amy. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded, and said, All right, I'll bet with you. But don't be happy too early. I'm quite picky when it comes to food. Meg's face lit up. Since it's about food, no matter how picky your mouth is, I can make you shut up and focus on eating. Rome turned around and went into the kitchen. He casually picked up a half-finished long sword from the ground, and walked out, and threw it to Meg casually. Meg caught the long sword agilely. The black long sword was quite light in his hand, but it looked like it wasn't completed yet. The patterns on the hilt and body of the sword hadn't been carved yet, either. However, even if it was only a half-finished long sword, it could still be considered a good sword. Good sword. Thank you, Master Rome. Please wait for a moment. Meg cupped his hand slightly, and walked towards the fire with the sword and bucket. Putting down the bucket, Meg used snow to wash the long sword. Then, he opened the lid and grabbed that fat head fish. Looking at the fat head fish struggling in his hand, he chuckled, and said, Continue to jump. Chapter 1170. The fat head fish struggled crazily in Meg's hands. Its head, which was made of iron, shook crazily as it tried to break free from Meg's hands. However, Meg's hands were like iron pliers clamping it firmly. No matter how much it struggled, he picked up the black long sword, and with a swing of the sword, the fat head fish was already split into two from the middle. This knife technique. Rome, who was originally a little conflicted about letting a chef use the weapon that he had forged to kill fish, had his eyes lit up. The clean and neat knife technique cut the third-grade big fish into two halves. The clean cut, the almost identical two halves of the fish, and the internal organs were evenly distributed on both sides without any damage. Even the experts from various races who usually lined up outside the shop would not be able to do this if they were asked to do it. After the internal organs were removed, the long sword was flipped, and the fine scales flew off. In the blink of an eye, the whole fish had already become a fish head that was evenly split into two halves on the plate. Mag cut off a small section of the fish tail. Because this fat head fish's body was very short, and its meat was very succulent, there was still a section of meat left under the fish head. The utilization of the whole fish was very high. This is probably the fat head fish that was specially made for the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, right? Meg looked at the small half of the fish tail in his hand. He used a bamboo stick to string it up, and then put it directly on the fire to roast. This was Ugly Duckling's dinner. After removing the gills, he made a few cuts on the meat of the fish. Then, he added cooking wine, pepper, salt, and other condiments, rubbed it evenly, and put it aside to marinate. He took out the marinated chili and pickled ginger that he had bought directly from the system from his bag, and chopped them on the small chopping board that he had brought with him. Then, he poured a little cooking wine into a small plate for later use. He sliced the ginger and chopped the green onions into sections, and laid them at the bottom of the big flat bowl. Then, he placed the marinated fish head on top and placed the bright red chopped chili on the fish head. There was a steamer on the fire, and the water in the steamer was drawn from the well not far away. The fire soon boiled the pot. Meg put the plate with the fish into the steamer, covered the lid, and let the fish steam in the pot. Then, he just had to wait for it to be ready. Rome walked to the bonfire and looked at Meg in surprise. He was never a person who knew how to cook for himself. He was used to drinking strong wine and eating a large piece of meat in the tavern to fill his stomach. He had never watched someone cook so seriously and closely. Mag's cooking was different from the crude and simple way he had imagined. The way Mag focused on cooking was better than any of the outstanding blacksmiths he had seen before. Mag was calm and confident, and his movements were smooth and fluid. His focused look made the people around him hold their breaths, afraid that they would disturb his wonderful performance. Meg flipped the fishtail over and raised his head. He was surprised to see Rome by the bonfire. He smiled and said, "Master Rome, please wait a moment. It will take some time before the pot is ready." "Yes." Rome coughed softly to hide his awkwardness. He didn't think he would lose this bet. After all, it was up to him to decide if this dish suited his taste. In the empty space in front of the forging workshop at the corner of the street, the old dwarf, the young chef, and the young half-elf gathered around the bonfire, waiting for the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers to be ready. Meanwhile, Ugly Duckling looked up at the fish tail and swallowed its saliva subconsciously. The aroma of the grilled fish had already started to spread. It was a smell that cats would be addicted to. Meg picked up the bamboo skewer and spun it around to make sure the fishtail was done. He was ready to pluck it for Ugly Duckling. "Father, let me taste it for Ugly Duckling first," Amy said as she came forward with an expression of offering her body for her beloved pet. "Meow." Ugly Duckling quickly shook its head at Meg. A smile appeared on Meg's face. This little fellow was really gluttonous. She didn't even let go of Ugly Duckling's food. He looked at the small fish tail in his hand, broke off a small piece, and passed it to Amy. Then, he put the rest in front of Ugly Duckling. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling meowed at Meg gratefully. It picked up the fish tail and dashed up the big tree at the side. It sat on the tree branch and ate its dinner. Amy put the fish into her mouth and chewed. Her eyes lit up, and she said, "Although there's no salt, it's still delicious." Then, she looked at Ugly Duckling, who was sitting on the tree branch. As if it felt Amy's gaze, Ugly Duckling turned around slowly and faced her with its butt, pretending not to see her. "All right, that's Ugly Duckling's dinner. Let it eat." It wasn't easy on the road. Meg said with a smile. He took out a packet of rice noodles from his bag and put it aside as he looked at the steaming pot that was filled with white steam. "You'll be fat to death." Amy glanced at Ugly Duckling, and also looked at the steaming pot. After steaming for about 10 minutes, Meg took down the steaming pot and took out the fish head. He sprinkled some chopped green onions and drizzled a spoonful of soy sauce. He heated up the oil and poured it on top. Sizzle, a beautiful sound sounded. The hot chopped chili spread all over the fish head. The oil droplets jumped, and the hidden delicious taste was ignited at this moment. The fiery red chopped chili covered the white and tender fish head meat, and the steaming aroma wafted over. Gulp. Rome's throat moved, and a hint of surprise appeared on his wrinkled face under the light of the fire. There was a glimmer in his eyes. What a wonderful aroma. Is this really the aroma of fish? The warm feeling is wafting over. It makes one want to avoid it, but they can't help but go forward. It's too amazing. Rome looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers in disbelief. His heart was already in turmoil. His stomach started growling uncontrollably, and it made him blush. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. Since his stomach was growling, everything would be easy. He set up the steaming pot over the fire again and changed it to a pot of clear water. "Master Rome, please sit here. There's only one fish to serve tonight." Meg picked up the fish head and walked to the simple table and chair that the elderly usually used to bask in the sun. He put down the fish head and invited him. Amy had already jogged over and climbed onto the chair obediently. "Since I've already agreed to the bet, then I'll take a bite," Rome thought to himself as he walked to the small table. "Please try it." Meg passed a pair of chopsticks to Rome. Rome took the chopsticks, glanced at Meg, and then picked up a piece of chopped chili and put it into his mouth. "No." Meg wanted to stop him, but it was too late. "Oh." Rome's face suddenly turned red, and the sour and spicy taste exploded on the tip of his tongue. His entire tongue almost didn't belong to him anymore. The hot and spicy feeling spread from the tip of his tongue to all parts of his body. The surrounding chill suddenly disappeared, and fine sweat appeared on his forehead. Phew, Rome exhaled. After eating the chili, he felt as if his entire body had been cleansed. "You should be eating fish." Mag only managed to finish the rest of his sentence after that. Chapter 1171. Rome felt refreshed after eating a mouthful of chopped pepper. The burning sensation on his tongue gradually disappeared, and the sour and spicy taste was quite special. Meg peeled off the red chopped pepper with chopsticks, revealing the white and tender fish meat underneath. He said to Rome, "This is the fish head." "Of course I know it's the fish head. I just wanted to taste it," Rome said calmly, and then put a piece of fish meat into his mouth. The sour and spicy taste of chopped pepper was the first to bloom. He had already eaten a piece of chopped pepper before, so he didn't find it strange or hard to accept. The slightly weaker taste made him savor the taste more carefully. The soft and glutinous fish meat was fatty but not greasy, spicy, and delicious. The unique cooking method of steaming locked the freshness of the fish head firmly in the meat, and the sour and spicy taste of chopped pepper completely permeated the fish head from top to bottom. The delicious taste bloomed from the inside out. It was so delicious. Rome felt like a fireball exploded in his mind, turning into gorgeous fireworks. His scalp tingled slightly, and it was a very wonderful feeling. Vaguely, he suddenly remembered something. The morning before yesterday, he lost his temper at his 2 apprentices for no reason, and then drank the water that he had rinsed his mouth with. At noon yesterday, he tried to forge the sword that had been put away for more than a year. After swinging the hammer a few times, he fell asleep with the hammer in his arms. When he woke up, he forgot what he wanted to do and lost his temper at his 2 apprentices again. Many things that he had forgotten flashed through his mind. His scalp tingled slightly, but he felt that his mind was getting clearer and clearer, as if a layer of fog was gradually dispelled. Have I been living such a bad life? Rome looked at these pictures with some depression. He hadn't examined his behavior for a long time. Since 2 years ago, when he forgot what happened yesterday, he began to become irritable and suspicious. He drank every day, and used his anger to cover up his embarrassment and maintain his identity as a blacksmith master. After eating a mouthful of fish meat, he almost recalled his life in the past month. It could only be described as terrible. He was no longer the person who was extremely strict with his words, actions, and skills. Rome's mood was very complicated. He never thought that one day he would become such a person. But why would I suddenly think of these things? Rome was stunned. Although these were things that happened to him, he had been forgetting about them since 2 years ago. However, he just recalled the things that he had forgotten in the past month. Could it be? Rome opened his eyes and looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers on the big plate in front of him. He had only eaten a mouthful of fish meat. Could it be related to this fish head? With a suspicious attitude, Rome picked up another piece of fish head meat and put it into his mouth. The smooth and delicious taste was still wreaking havoc in his mouth, but Rome's attention wasn't on it. The slight numbness in his scalp continued, and more images appeared in his mind. The timeline kept moving backward. His eyes gradually widened, and a coherent memory once again appeared in his mind, and it was so clear. The things that he had lost for 2 years were actually back at this moment. This feeling was beyond anything for him. After swallowing the fish meat, Rome looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers in surprise. Even his voice was trembling. This fish meat can clear my mind and make my memory more coherent. It has such an effect. Meg was also a little surprised. It seemed that this fat-head fish did not grow a big head for nothing. However, seeing Master Rome so excited, could it be that he had been troubled by his mind not being clear before? Rome carefully picked up another piece of fish meat and put it in his mouth. He savored the taste of the delicious taste on the tip of his tongue, and then he accepted the gift of memory. He had completely forgotten about the idea of only eating one bite. Whether it was the extreme taste of the fish head or the magical discovery of the continuous recall of memory, he was immersed in it. It seems that Grandpa likes it very much. I want to try it too. Amy was holding a small bowl. She extended her small hand and picked up a piece of fish meat from the plate and put it in the small bowl. Then, she leaned forward and took a bite. Wow! Amy's eyes lit up. The spicy and sour fish meat was soft and tender. It was simply too delicious. Meg saw that the two of them were eating happily, so he also picked up his chopsticks and put a piece of fish meat into his mouth. The spicy and sour taste of the chopped chili was just right. It was not as hot as the spicy grilled fish, nor was it as sour as the pickled cabbage fish. The perfect spiciness made the spicy taste of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers look gentle and elegant, but it also had an intoxicating charm. The fish meat was soft and springy. The perfect heat control made the taste of the fish meat just right. It would have been overcooked if it had been too long, but it would have been too tender if it had been too short. After swallowing the fish meat, it turned into a warm current that warmed up his body. The slight numbness on his scalp made his mind clearer. Only this kind of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers is qualified to be called the real steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. A smile appeared on Meg's face. It was not in vain that he had chopped the fat head fish for an entire night in the test field for the god of cookery. When they were halfway through the meal, Meg stood up and threw the rice noodles into the boiling soup pot. Then, he sat back down and continued eating. The three of them ate heartily. Soon, the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers was only left with a few big fish bones and a plate of chopped chili. Finished eating, Rome reached out with her chopsticks and flipped through the chopped chili. She could not find any more fish meat, so she put her chopsticks away reluctantly. I feel like I can still eat another fish. Amy picked up a piece of chopped chili and put it into her mouth. She smacked her lips and did not feel any spiciness at all. Wait a moment. There's still rice noodles. Meg stood up and scooped 3 bowls of rice noodles. He sprinkled some chopped green onions on them, then scooped a few spoonfuls of red soup from the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and poured it over the rice noodles that had just come out of the pot. He handed a bowl to Rome. Rome hesitated for a moment and reached out to take the bowl of rice noodles. The white rice noodles were sprinkled with red soup, and a few chopped green onions were sprinkled on top. The aroma was already assailing their nostrils. The soup of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers is also one of the essences of this dish, Meg said with a smile. He slurped down a mouthful of rice noodles. The smooth rice noodles were soaked in the soup of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. It was sour and delicious. Rome looked at Meg, who was eating happily, and also took a mouthful of rice noodles. Oh! Rome, who was not looking forward to it, had her eyes lit up. The fish soup did not have a fishy smell. It was sour and delicious. Coupled with the smooth rice noodles, she slurped it into her mouth. One mouthful after another, it was so delicious that she could not stop eating. How could ordinary noodles become so delicious after 2 spoonfuls of fish soup? This guy, is he a genius? Rome put down the empty bowl in her hand and looked at Meg in amazement. Her previous prejudice against chefs had completely disappeared. Chapter 1172. Sorry for the inconvenience. Meg kept a few empty bowls, and smiled at Rome. I wonder if Master Rome is satisfied with this dinner? Rome nodded with a complicated expression. He hesitated for a while, and couldn't help but ask, I would like to know what kind of fish is this? Why did I remember so many things that I had forgotten before after eating it? This is a fat head fish caught from the extreme north of the Roth Empire. It's also known as the icebreaker fish. The fish head has the effect of nourishing the brain. This fat head fish's head is much bigger than ordinary fish, and it lives in an extremely cold place. Perhaps it has some special effects, Meg said after pondering for a while. I see. Not everyone can go to the extreme north. Rome came to a realization, and then felt a little lost. After eating that steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, he felt that he had become clear-headed all of a sudden. Everything that had happened in the past year was still vivid in his mind, and he didn't feel restrained when he was thinking. Obviously, all of this was obtained after eating that fish. After being muddled for 2 years, this rare moment of clear-headedness made him feel very precious. However, it was obviously impossible for him to catch such a fat head fish from the extreme north. Thus, the idea of eating this fat head fish often to ensure his clear-headedness naturally fell through. Meg looked at Rome's changing expressions, and already had a rough idea. He smiled, and said, Master Rome, If you still want to eat this steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, you can look for me in Chaos City. My restaurant is opened there. If you can get a good cleaver, there will be steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers for you every day. Chaos City. Rome was slightly taken aback. He looked at his forge with a pondering expression. He had stayed here for over 400 years, and had almost spent his entire life here. He had also thought of dying here countless times. Regardless of war or peace, he had never thought of leaving this place. Perhaps it was nostalgia, or perhaps it was fear. The outside world was foreign to him. He had no friends, only customers. He had never left Isen Castle, and didn't know what the outside world was like. The shabby smithy, which was regarded as a blacksmith's honor and holy land, was his most gorgeous clothes and his impenetrable fortress. And now, Meg had invited him with a plate of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Instead of dying in a muddled state, it's better to change to a different place and die with a clear mind on the forging table. Rome's gaze became resolute. The workshop that he regarded as a treasure suddenly became worthless. If we go to Chaos City, we can eat steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers every day? Rome asked Meg seriously. If you come to line up a little earlier every day, there should be no problem. Meg nodded with a smile. The richest blacksmith in the world naturally did not need to consider money. Rome nodded slightly and didn't say anything, but he had already made up his mind. Master Rome, about our bet. Meg said. You won. I admit that your steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers is the most delicious food I've ever eaten. It's also the most special food. I want to apologize for my rash words previously. You're an excellent chef, Rome said solemnly. Master is a magnanimous person, Meg said with a smile. Rome also smiled, and quickly said, What kind of cleaver do you want? I'll make it for you tomorrow. This is the blueprint. I want a cleaver like this. Meg took out a blueprint from his pocket, and passed it to Rome. Seems like you were very confident that you could convince me right from the start. Rome took the blueprint with a smile, and glanced at it before putting it in his pocket. A cleaver was not a problem for him. It's not easy to come to Isen Castle. If I can't convince Master Rome, it'll be a wasted trip, Meg also said with a smile. Although he still had to stay for another day, he had completed the task ahead of time. I've finished the fish head, but I still have wine. Do you want some? Rome took out a wine bag from his waist and passed it to Meg. I have a child with me, so I can only drink with you. Meg took the wine bag and took a big gulp. The strong wine didn't taste too good when it entered his throat, and then he passed the wine bag back to Rome. If that's the case, I won't force you. Rome took the wine bag and took 2 big gulps. He wiped his mouth and said, Do you have a place to stay for the night? His gaze fell on Amy. It was the coldest time of winter, and the little girl was so young. It was not good for her to stay out for a night. We plan to stay at the Tam Hotel in front, Meg said as he pointed to the front. Rome waved his hand, and said, Okay, then you can go now. Come back tomorrow evening to get the kitchen knife. Goodbye, Master Rome. Meg put the washed dishes back into his backpack, and said goodbye to Rome. He took out a piece of wood that was still burning from the fire and used it as a torch. He held Amy's hand and walked along the street. Goodbye, Grandpa. Amy waved at Rome with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and happily skipped after Meg. The street was not very wide, and it was paved with flat stones. Every stone was cut into squares of almost the same size and pieced together perfectly. There were almost obvious gaps. The stone houses on both sides of the street were also built with square stones. They were neat and tidy. The extraordinary skills and strict character of the dwarfs were undeniable in this aspect. Above the street was not a vast starry sky, but black rocks. It was just that they were tens of meters above the ground. It was not easy to find them under the cover of the night. However, there would be a large hole for ventilation and light every once in a while, so the interior of Isen Castle did not seem to be closed and oppressive. This huge building complex that had been built by generations of dwarfs for thousands of years could be said to be a work of the gods. It was impossible to replicate. The racial war back then had destroyed more than half of the Isen Castle. However, after 100 years of peace, the current Isen castle had become even more spectacular and dangerous. It was known as one of the most difficult cities to break into in the world. Meg brought Amy to the end of the street. The torch in his hand was completely extinguished by the cold wind. This way. Meg looked around. There was a rather lively tavern at the end of the street. Loud laughter and discussions could be heard from inside from time to time. Opposite the tavern was the tam inn they were looking for. The iron sign hanging on the door swayed in the wind. The door was tightly shut. Warm light could be seen through the window. There was also a courtyard to the side, with many carriages and horses inside. Meg went up and knocked on the door. Soon, the door opened. An old dwarf with a hunched back opened the door a crack. He looked at Meg cautiously and said, "You want to stay in the inn?" "Yes, my daughter and I want to stay in the inn for a night." Meg nodded and said. In the tavern next door, there were guests of all races. They were drinking hard liquor and talking loudly. "Sir Hayden, did you see Master Rome today?" The bartender asked curiously as he looked at Hardeng. The surrounding people also looked over when they heard that. In Isen Castle, any news related to Master Rom would be of interest to everyone. Chapter 1173. Although I didn't see Master Rome today, I believe I'm not far from meeting him. Seeing how sincere I am, I believe Master Rome will make a divine weapon for me sooner or later. Hardeng tilted his head back and took a big gulp of wine with a smug look on his face. "That's what you said last month, too." An orc at the side pursed his lips. He had also gone to line up today, so he naturally knew what was going on. Even if all the people in front of him had their turn, it would still be Hardeng's turn. Hardeng glanced at that orc, and was sure he was an opponent he couldn't beat. He couldn't be bothered to argue with him, and instead smiled. "However, there's a chef today. I heard he came from Chaos City, and said he was looking for Master Rome to make a cleaver for him. Don't you think it's funny? Looking for Master Rome to make a cleaver for him? Is there something wrong with that fellow's brain? Yeah. Who is Master Rome? He's the #1 blacksmith on the Norland continent. Someone actually wants him to make a cleaver for him? Speaking of which, wasn't that fellow hammered to death by Master Rome on the spot?" There was an uproar in the tavern. The dwarfs in Isen Castle were born blacksmiths. Even a 10-year-old child could make a cleaver for him. Someone actually looked for the legendary blacksmith, Master Rome, to make a cleaver for him. Wasn't he deliberately looking for trouble? Hardeng shook his head with a smile, and said, "After Master Rome made it clear that he wouldn't be taking orders today, we all left. However, that fellow wasn't very tactful. He still refused to leave. I don't know what happened after that. However, that fellow is obviously stubborn. Perhaps he'll still go tomorrow. We'll know when we see him tomorrow. Then we have to go tomorrow. I want to see who has the guts to come to Isen Castle and ruin Master Rome's reputation. Yes, we have to go and see." There was a wave of agreement in the tavern. To the young dwarven blacksmiths, Master Rome was their idol. How could they allow someone to insult him like this? Meg, who had just checked into the best room in Tam Hotel, was tidying up the room. He did not know that a group of people was preparing to laugh at him and beat him up. Of course, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Right now, there was nothing more important than letting Amy have a good night's sleep. The Tam Inn was not a high-end inn, and the low-priced rooms were damp and dirty. Therefore, Meg spent an extra 100 copper coins to get the best room in the inn. His room was on the second floor, far away from the tavern, so he didn't have to endure the drunkards howling in the middle of the night. The decoration of the room was very simple. There was a stone bed, 2 mattresses, a small stone table, and 2 stone stools. There was nothing else in the room. Compared to the rooms on the first floor, the biggest difference was that the ventilation was not bad and the room was much cleaner. Meg tidied up all the blankets on the bed and threw them on the chair in the corner. Then, he bought 2 comfortable down blankets from the system. Only then did he carry the sleepy Amy to the bed and cover her with the blankets. Ugly Duckling snuggled into the blankets and nestled comfortably in Amy's arms. It also closed its eyes and fell asleep immediately. The next morning, Joey and Joss came to the forge early in the morning. However, they were surprised to find that the forge door was open. Could it be that Master Rome was drunk again yesterday? Joey said uneasily. Master Rome was drunk a few days ago and fell asleep at the forge door. As a result, he was sick for a few days. Let's go and take a look. Joss also said nervously. Although Master Rome often lost his temper with them, in their hearts, Master Rome was still the person they admired the most. The two of them walked quickly to the forge door. They heard the sound of iron being hammered inside. The crisp sound had a wonderful rhythm. What's this? Both of them were taken aback. In the past few months, they had rarely seen Master Rome forge by himself. Most of the time, they had only seen him sitting in front of the furnace in a daze. Often, he would sit there for an entire day. Furthermore, he would drink a lot of alcohol every night and wake up very late the next day. So, what was with the sound of iron being hammered in the forge now? With doubts in their hearts, the two of them gently pushed open the forge door and walked in. They saw Master Rome standing in front of the forging table in thin clothes. He was wielding his black heavy hammer and hammering the fiery red iron embryo on the forging table with sweat pouring down his face. Master Rome, who was more than 400 years old, still had a strong body that made young people feel ashamed of their inferiority. The black heavy hammer, which weighed at least 150 kilograms, was extremely light and agile in his hands. It spun and danced, and then smashed heavily on the iron embryo. The iron embryo, which was mixed with various precious metals, was deformed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It fused with each other and became a new alloy. Then, it gradually took shape under the heavy hammer. Joss and Joey stood at the door and looked at Master Rome in shock. The wonderful rhythm between him and the heavy hammer was like the harmony between man and nature. This was the first time they had seen Master Rome so immersed in forging after coming to the forge. This scene completely subverted their imaginations of forging. At this moment, he was no longer the grumpy Master Rome, but a truly world-renowned Master Rome. With his amazing forging skills, he presented one amazing divine weapon after another. Ding! The heavy hammer hit the iron embryo. Master Rome slowly put down the hammer in his hand. His chest rose and fell slightly. He grabbed a towel and wiped the sweat on his face. He looked up at Joey and Joss, who were standing at the door in shock. He smiled and said, "What, do you want to learn?" "Yes." Joey and Joss nodded at the same time without thinking. Rome laughed and said, "If you want to learn, then you have to work hard. I never teach my skills to lazy people." Joey and Joss looked at the smile on Rome's face and were stunned. Master Rome always had a straight face. He had never smiled at them, nor had he ever mentioned teaching them forging. He only told them to forge by themselves every day, or to drive away the untactful customers at the door. You want to teach us how to forge weapons?" Joey was the first to react. He looked at Rome in disbelief. Really? Joss was still stunned and couldn't believe it. "Since I let you into the forge, I will naturally teach you something. As for how much you can learn, it depends on your own ability." Rome picked up the heavy hammer again and said with a smile, "I just received a new order yesterday. Today, I will teach you how to forge a kitchen knife." "Kitchen knife?" Joey and Joss were stunned again. "You mean the kitchen knife that chefs use to cook?" Joey asked cautiously. Yesterday, he had angered Master Rome when he reported that the chef wanted to see him. Why did he decide to forge a kitchen knife today? No pop-up window. Chapter 1174. That's right. I received the order from the chef from Chaos City that you reported to me yesterday. My job today is to forge a cleaver for him that can cut through the skull of a 10th tier magic beast before nightfall. Rome nodded. He raised his hammer and smashed it on the metal block on the forging table as he began to explain the hammering techniques used to forge different weapons. Although Joey and Joss were puzzled as to why Master Rome would suddenly accept that chef's order, they immediately calmed down and listened to the master's explanation seriously when he began to explain the forging techniques. Outside the workshop, Hardeng and the rest had also arrived early, and formed a long line at the door. There were also many people who had heard from Hardeng yesterday that someone was looking for a Rome master to forge a cleaver, and were here to watch the joke. Is that fellow who's looking for a master to forge a cleaver here? Everyone's gaze swept across the line. There were 2 human knights, but they didn't look like chefs. Did that guy know what's good for him and leave? Hardeng, who was at the back of the line, also looked left and right in surprise. Even he wasn't confident that he could get a Rome master to forge a weapon for him, let alone a chef who wanted a cleaver. The news of a chef from Chaos City looking for a Rome master to forge a cleaver spread like wildfire in Isen Castle, and became the source of joy in Isen Castle today. Meg checked out of his room, and left his luggage at the hotel temporarily. He was about to bring Amy out for breakfast when a voice rang out. "Mr. Meg. You're here." Just then, a voice sounded from behind. "Oh, it's Mr. Godalla," Meg said with a smile as he looked at Godalla, who was walking over from the side. Godalla was also staying in this hotel, so it wasn't strange for them to meet. It seemed like he had just had his breakfast, and was chatting with a few people who were also dressed like businessmen. Godalla walked over, and softly said to Meg with a smile, "I heard you guys have become famous. It's spread all over Isen Castle that a chef from Chaos City is looking for a Rome master to forge a cleaver. You can become famous like this?" Meg was a little surprised. After coming to Isen Castle, he did not do anything out of line. He was like a pure and innocent person. You don't know Master Rome's status in Isen Castle. Asking him to make a kitchen knife is an insult to all the blacksmiths in Isen Castle, Godalla said in a low voice. "I see." Meg was deep in thought. If they knew that Master Rome had agreed to make a kitchen knife for him, the whole Isen Castle would probably go crazy. "You didn't see Master Rome yesterday, right? Don't worry. There are so many people lining up outside the Master's door every day, but they never get to see him. You'll get used to it," Godalla comforted. "It's okay, I'm in a good mood," Meg said with a smile. He was afraid that Godalla's reaction would be too big and attract too much attention, so Meg did not make it clear. "Father, I'm hungry." Amy looked up at Meg, and expectantly said, "Let's go and eat something good. I don't have anything to do today anyway. Why don't I bring you to Isen Castle? Not many people know what's good here as well as I do," Godalla said with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Godalla." Meg's eyes lit up. It was naturally the best to have a guide since they were new here. It could help them avoid a lot of trouble. After walking out of Tam Hotel, the light from the hole above lit up the street. The shops on both sides of the street were all open. Most of the people walking on the street were dwarfs, and 1 or 2 people from other races could be seen occasionally. Isen Castle's weapons were popular on the Norland continent, so many merchants gathered there. They brought rare items from all over to Isen Castle to sell, and then bought weapons from Isen Castle to sell all over the world. They made a lot of money in one round trip. The dwarfs were considered a neutral race. They had a good relationship with all the other races on the Norland continent, so they allowed all races to enter Isen Castle and do business. Godalla told Meg some of the rules of Isen Castle and the dwarfs on the way. He brought Meg and the rest to eat a kind of big flatbread called the dwarf flatbread for breakfast. The flatbread was fried in a pan of oil, and then baked in a high-temperature oven until it was crispy. It was crispy, and there were even salty dried vegetables in the middle. It tasted like a combination of sesame seed cake and guacamole. It was crispy and delicious, and didn't feel greasy at all. It really surprised Meg. "The flatbread here is not bad, right?" Godalla took a bite of the flatbread in his hand, and smilingly said, "There are hundreds of flatbread shops in Isen Castle, but none of them make as good as this one. I don't usually bring people here. Millimeter. This flatbread fried chicken is delicious." Amy nodded her little head. She hugged the flatbread with both hands like a little squirrel, and munched on it with relish. "It is indeed a very delicious flatbread." Meg nodded. This was a benefit that he had thought of. If he were to look for it himself, he definitely wouldn't be able to eat such delicious flatbread. After breakfast, Godalla brought Meg and Amy to visit a few famous scenic spots in Isen Castle. They had a lot of delicious snacks along the way, and had a lot of fun. When it was close to evening, Godalla looked at Meg, and said, "Brother Meg, why don't I bring you to the blacksmith I know to make a cleaver for you? Although he can't compare to Master Rome, he is still one of the top blacksmiths in Isen Castle. With my friendship with him, I can even get him to make one for you for free. Let's go over now. You tell him what kind of cleaver you want, and I will bring you guys out for good food tonight. Actually, Master Rome already promised to make me a cleaver last night. Looking at the time, it's time to go get one now, Meg said with a smile as he glanced at his watch. What? Godala was stunned for a moment, and felt that he had misheard something. After Grandpa ate the fish head that Father made yesterday, he promised Father to make him a cleaver, Amy added, and looked at Godala expectantly. Uncle Merchant, what's the delicious thing you're talking about? Master Rome agreed to make you a cleaver. Godala's voice went up a few pitches, and then he hurriedly covered his mouth as he looked at Meg in shock. As a merchant who had been in and out of Isen Castle for 20 to 30 years, he knew very well what Master Rome represented. Those who could order weapons from him were all powerhouses of various races, and they had to pay an extremely high price. It was said that a merchant was fortunate enough to order a weapon from Master Rome, and immediately retired after selling it. Of course, this was only a legend. To order a weapon from Master Rome, one had to have both status and money. In the past 2 years, Master Rome had not accepted a single order, nor had he produced any new products. But now, Meg said that Master Rome had agreed to make him a cleaver, and that he could get it today. This was even more shocking than Master Rome agreeing to make him a weapon. Chapter 1175. Brother Meg, are you trying to make fun of me? Did Master Rome really agree to make a cleaver for you? Godala looked at Meg. He still could not convince himself. Meg nodded with a smile. Yes. If you don't believe me, why don't you come with us to the workshop to get the cleaver? I should be the one to thank you for taking care of me for the past 2 days. Hey, that's nothing. Of course, I trust you. Godala quickly waved his hand, and said, but since it's almost time, let's hurry over. It's not good to keep Master Rome waiting. All right. Meg nodded, and the 3 of them walked towards the carriage parked nearby. The door of Master Rome's workshop did not open for the entire day. The customers in the queue were anxious and helpless. Although they usually heard bad news, the lack of movement made them even more anxious. That chef hasn't appeared yet. The crowd had changed a few times, but the chef who asked Master Rome to make a custom-made cleaver did not appear, nor did Master Rome open the door to welcome customers. It was really boring. It's time for dinner again, and the workshop's door is still not open. Looks like it's going to be another fruitless day. Hardeng, who was at the back of the queue, sighed. Although he was used to it, it would be a lie to say that he was not melancholy. Moreover, the chef did not come today, so he was missing a source of joy. After all, his strength was at the bottom here. It was rare for someone to be ranked behind him. He even regretted his harsh words yesterday. Just as everyone was about to leave, the workshop's tightly shut door suddenly opened. Joey walked out and scanned the crowd as if he was looking for someone. Everyone quickly stopped in their tracks. Little Master, how's Master Rome's mood today? Will he accept new orders? The orc standing at the front asked nervously. Joey did not find the human who brought the cute girl yesterday. It seemed that he had not arrived yet. He looked away and shook his head at the orc. Master said that he won't be accepting orders today, but he'll be forging a new cleaver today. A new saber forged by the Master of Rome. If I remember correctly, Master Rome hasn't produced a new weapon for 2 years, right? 2 years of polishing. Could it be that this is another divine weapon that can dominate a region? The crowd was in an uproar. Master Rome had been silent for 2 years and hadn't released any new weapons. No one had expected him to succeed in forging a new saber. This was big news. No one knew who had ordered the saber. Joey's expression was a little strange. If these people knew that it was a kitchen knife, he wondered what kind of expression they would have. If there's nothing else, please disperse. I still have to wait here for a guest to pick up the knife, Joey said. In this situation, it was better to have fewer people. Masters did not like crowds. Are we going to use the saber today? Then can we all see that saber with our own eyes? I might be able to brag about this moment for the rest of my life. I have to stay and watch for a while more. As soon as Joey said this, the crowd became excited. Those who were about to leave stopped in their tracks. They were all curious about who would get the saber and what kind of amazing saber it would be. When can I be like that master and get a divine weapon forged by the master of Rome? Hardeng was also envious. Others had already started to pick up the saber, but he was still at the back of the line. People looked up and even lowered their voices. They were afraid that they would accidentally provoke the master who was coming to pick up the saber. At this moment, a carriage came from afar. Could it be that the big shot with the saber is in this carriage? Everyone's eyes lit up. Although the carriage looked ordinary, and the driver was just an ordinary human, perhaps the big boss was a low-key person. The carriage slowly stopped in front of the workshop. The driver was a little nervous because so many people were staring at him. He held the reins and did not dare to move. Under the watchful eyes of the people in front of the workshop, the curtain of the carriage was lifted. A young man with a light mustache walked out of the carriage. Behind him was a little half-elf lowly of 4 or 5 years old. This master was indeed a master. He looked so young, but he brought a cute little lowly with him. He was the center of attention wherever he went. The onlookers were secretly amazed by the man's handsomeness and the master's demeanor, as well as the cute little lowly. Isn't this the chef from yesterday? Hardeng stared at Meg and Amy who got out of the carriage. The customers in the line also recognized Meg and rolled their eyes. This guy asked the master of Rome to forge a kitchen knife yesterday. How could he be the master who came to pick up the saber? Is this the chef who asked the master of Rome to forge a kitchen knife? The onlookers were also slightly stunned. They had waited for the mysterious chef for a whole day, but he did not appear. They did not expect him to appear in the evening. They almost thought that he was the master who came to pick up the saber. I say, isn't this guy too shameless? He actually dares to appear in front of the workshop. Does he also want the master of Rome to forge a kitchen knife for him today? Yes, a chef actually dares to make such a request. The master of Rome is the #1 blacksmith in Isen Castle. I've waited here for a whole day to teach this guy who doesn't know his place a lesson. I'll let him know the price of disrespecting the master of Rome. The onlookers gradually became angry. Many of them rubbed their fists and were ready to teach Meg a lesson. Hee, I didn't expect you to dare to come today. Are you going to ask the master of Rome to forge a kitchen knife for you? But it looks like you won't even be able to walk to the door today, Hardeng said with a hint of schadenfreude as he looked at Meg, who was holding Amy's hand, with a mocking expression. Meg looked at the excited onlookers, and then at the gloating Hardeng. He smiled calmly and said, "Is that so? I'm here to pick up the kitchen knife today." Hardeng was stunned. The dwarfs who were about to surround them also stopped and looked at Meg with some confusion. Pick up the kitchen knife? You mean the master of Rome has already agreed to forge a kitchen knife for you? Hardeng came back to his senses and curled his lips in disdain. If the master of Rome is going to forge a kitchen knife for you, I'll kneel here today and call you father. Mr. Meg, you're here. Roy quickly stepped forward and looked at Meg with a smile. Your custom-made kitchen knife has been forged. The master is waiting for you inside. Chapter 1176. Hardeng's smug expression froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the smiling Joey. His mind was in a mess. What did this young master just say? Did Master Rome really forge a cleaver for this chef? How? How is that possible? Master Rome has been quiet for 2 years, and is forging a cleaver for a chef for the first time? Could it be that this person is not only a chef, but also a hidden master? The onlookers also stared at Meg in disbelief. They couldn't believe that the world's #1 blacksmith would personally forge a cleaver for a chef. Especially those customers who came to line up in front of the workshop every day. They even wanted to eat Mag alive. They lined up respectfully every day, but they didn't even have a chance to see Master Rome. But this guy was here for the first time yesterday, and he was able to make Master Rome forge a cleaver for him. However, this was a customer who had an order from Master Rome, so they didn't dare to act rashly. If they angered Master Rome, it would be impossible for him to forge a weapon for them. Call him Daddy. Meg sized up Hardeng, then looked at Amy. Amy, what do you think of this little brother? No, he's too ugly. He's even uglier than Ugly Duckling. I don't want a brother like this. Amy shook her head seriously. That's a problem. Meg nodded in agreement. The conversation between the father and daughter made the onlookers burst into laughter. However, Hardeng was the one who had boasted, so they couldn't say anything about the father and daughter. You too. Hardeng was so angry that his beard trembled. The father and daughter were obviously mocking his handsome appearance, but he was the one who said it just now. In the blink of an eye, he was slapped in the face. Now, he didn't know how to refute. Meg looked around, then pointed at an ugly and black rock not far away. How about this? Go over there and kneel down in front of that rock and call it Daddy, and we'll forget about this. You might even become brothers with the great sage in the future. Then you won't have to worry about any weapon. Hardeng was confused by what he was talking about, but he understood that Meg wanted him to kneel down in front of that rock and call it Daddy. It was too humiliating. You're a grown-up now. You have to keep your word. Amy looked up at Hardeng with encouragement written all over her face. Yes, we all heard it. Hurry up and call it Daddy. We're still waiting to see the new cleaver made by Master Rome. Even if it's a kitchen knife, it's a kitchen knife forged by Master Rom. It's probably the only kitchen knife forged by Master Rom in the world. The onlookers joined in the commotion. After all, they didn't mind the commotion. Hardeng's face turned red when he heard the crowd's laughter. He looked at Meg, who was standing still, and didn't intend to let it go. He gritted his teeth and said, "Must you force me? I'm not forcing you. You're the one who's forcing yourself." Meg looked at Hardeng and said calmly, "You can refuse to fulfill your promise, but I heard that Master Rome values integrity the most." Hardeng's expression changed slightly. He looked in the direction of the workshop, gritted his teeth, and walked toward the black rock not far away. He knelt on the ground with a plop, then called out to the rock, "Daddy." Everyone looked at Hardeng with smiles on their faces. Seeing a demon call a rock daddy was not a waste of their time today. Brother Meg is also a brave person. Godalla, who was sitting in the carriage, sighed to himself. He looked at the sullen demon and was worried. This demon didn't look friendly. Would he take revenge on Brother Meg after this? Let's go. Meg retracted his gaze, held Amy's hand, and followed Joey to the workshop's door. He wasn't a clay figurine. How could he allow others to mock him? Joey opened the door and let Meg and Amy in before closing the door again. Everyone looked around curiously. They all wanted to know what a kitchen knife made by Master Rome looked like. Even if it was used as a weapon, it would most likely be a divine weapon, right? "Mr. Meg, you're here," Master Rome said with a smile as he walked out of the workshop after washing his hands when Meg entered. "Yes, I had fun at Isen Castle again today, so I came a little late." "Sorry to keep Master Rome waiting," Meg said apologetically. "It's okay. I just finished making the kitchen knife you wanted. You came at the right time." Rome shook his head and pointed to the forging table at the side. "Go and see if this kitchen knife suits your taste." "Okay." Meg nodded and walked toward the forging table. Before he got close, the shining golden light made him squint his eyes subconsciously. In the middle of the forging table, a kitchen knife was placed quietly on the knife rack. The broad back of the knife, the sharp edge of the knife, and the sharp blade exuded a formidable chill. It was a neat Chinese kitchen knife. It was also the style of the kitchen knife drawn on the blueprint Meg gave to Master Rome yesterday. Whether the knife is suitable or not, you'll only know when you try it, Master Rome's voice came from behind. "I agree with this statement," Meg replied with a smile, and then reached out to hold the kitchen knife. The kitchen knife was one piece, and the handle was also made of metal. After a few anti-slip lines were carefully polished, it felt more comfortable to hold than wood, and was slightly cool to the touch. Moreover, the kitchen knife didn't look heavy, but it weighed about 15 kilograms. The extremely dense metal was condensed into such a knife after being hammered thousands of times. It was clear that Master Rome's skills were superb. But for Meg, this kitchen knife was just right for him. It wasn't as light as an ordinary kitchen knife, and the texture was excellent. Try it. Rome handed over an iron rod as thick as an arm. Try this. Meg took the iron rod with a little surprise. If you can't even try this, then how can you split open the head of a level 10 magic beast? Rome asked in return. That's true. Meg nodded, and with a slap, the iron rod was flattened like a cucumber. Then it was cut into the length of a flame, and the length of a hair. What amazing knife skills! Roy and Luz were stunned. There was actually someone in this world who could cut a piece of iron into the size of a hair, and the length of each strand was exactly the same. Good knife. Meg praised from the bottom of his heart as he put away the knife. There wasn't the slightest scratch on the surface of the knife, and the edge of the knife was flawless. It was much better than the golden kitchen knife given by the system in the test field for the god of cookery. I wonder how much I should pay Master Rome for such a good knife. Meg put down the kitchen knife and looked at Master Rome. Chapter 1177. Although it was a kitchen knife, Meg was sure that most of the swords of a level 10 knight would not be able to defeat it. Master Rom was right. This was a kitchen knife that could cut through the skull of a 10th tier magical beast. Even if it was used to skin a WRM, it would probably be very handy. The price of such a kitchen knife could not be measured by a simple kitchen knife. Even if it was priced according to the best weapon, Meg would not feel that he was being cheated. This knife is free. It's for you. Master Rom shook his head, and smilingly said, however, before you take it away, I have to give it a name. This is also my rule. I don't care how you use the sword or saber, but I have to name the sword or saber that I forge. Please give it a name, Master. Mag handed over the cleaver with both hands. He knew this rule. Master Rom was the one who decided on the name of the Tien Du sword. Speaking of which, he probably had a fetish for naming things. Master Rome took the kitchen knife and pondered for a while. His eyes lit up. I got it. This knife will be called Fat Head Fish. Fat. Meg opened his mouth, but swallowed the rest of his words. Well, since the knife was a gift, then so be it. As long as the master was happy. Yesterday's fat head fish had died a worthy death. Master Rome took out a metal pen and engraved a few words on the corner of the kitchen knife. He put away the pen and nodded with satisfaction. Then he handed the kitchen knife to Meg. Thank you for the knife, Master. Meg took the kitchen knife with both hands and thanked him. He knew that Master Rome was not short of money, but he still remembered the kindness in his heart. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the divine knife, Fat Head Fish. You have completed the mission to obtain the god of cooking's kitchen knife. You have received a reward, a chance to return to the top. The reward will last for 15 minutes. The system's voice rang in Meg's mind, and 2 fireworks exploded. You're welcome. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you for your hospitality last night. Master Rome waved his hand. After waking up this morning, he felt completely different from before. He felt that he could continue to work on the forging table for a few more years and continue to do what he liked. And all this was thanks to Meg's steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers last night. It felt so good to be sober. He was willing to exchange all his wealth for a clear mind. The things piled up in the cellar were useless to him. Oh, yes. Mr. Meg, you said that your restaurant is in Chaos City. If I live in Chaos City, will I be able to eat your steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers every day? The Rome Master asked Meg with anticipation in his eyes. Master Rome, are you planning to move your workshop to Chaos City? If that's the case, as long as you come to the restaurant early every day, you'll be able to eat the steamed fish head with diced hot peppers. Meg looked at the Rome Master with shock, and then smilingly said, if you come to Chaos City, The steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers that you order will be provided for free. Master wants to move the workshop to Chaos City. Joey and Joss were also shocked as they looked at the Rome Master in disbelief. In the past 400 years, Master Rome Master had never left Isen Castle. Even when the founding emperor of the Roth Empire wanted him to forge a sword for him, it was also forged in this workshop before the Roth Empire welcomed it back. Countless famous legendary weapons on the Norland continent were forged in this seemingly run-down workshop. This place was also regarded as the Holy Land by the blacksmiths in Isen Castle. And now, the master actually wanted to move his workshop to Chaos City just to eat that steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers? Wasn't this too crazy? No, no. Master Rome Master shook his head upon hearing that, and smilingly said, I've never spent much money in my life. There's no point in leaving this money there. I have to spend more. Moreover, I have to think of a way to move all this money to Chaos City. I reckon it will take a few days to move all this money out, Master Rome mumbled to himself in frustration. Meg was speechless. Ordinary people really couldn't experience the troubles of having too much money. If Master wants to make the money flow more easily, perhaps I can ask my friends at Buffett Banks to help you count the money when I return to Chaos City, and then exchange it for a certificate of deposit of the same value. In that case, you can come to Chaos City directly with the certificate of deposit, and withdraw money from the bank whenever you need it, Meg suggested. There's such a convenient thing. I'll have to trouble Mr. Meg then. Rome Master's eyes lit up. This had solved a huge problem for him. I think they will be very happy to serve you, Meg said with a smile as a favor to Hill. He happened to have something that he needed her help with. Then, Master Rome Master, let's meet in Chaos City. I'll take my leave first. Meg kept his cleaver, and bade farewell to Master Rome. Goodbye, Grandpa. Amy waved her hand obediently. We'll meet again very soon. Rome Master nodded with a smile. Joey quickly walked to the door, opened the door for Meg and the rest, and sent them out with a smile. This was the first time he saw the master smiling so much, and his temper had improved. He even taught them many forging skills attentively today. This had something to do with Meg. His out. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw Meg come out. They craned their necks to look, wanting to know what kind of cleaver Master Rome had made for Meg. However, Meg's hands were empty. They didn't see any cleaver, so he must have put it away. Little brother, what kind of cleaver did Master Rome make for you? Can you take it out for everyone to see? A dwarf standing in the front row asked curiously. Everyone chimed in, and invited Meg to take out the cleaver for everyone to see. Hardeng stood behind the crowd, and couldn't help but tiptoe to look. He had been in Isen Castle for a year, and had never seen a weapon made by Master Rome. Even if it was a cleaver, it would be nice to have a look. All right, then let everyone see Master Rome's new work. Meg saw everyone's anticipation, and hesitated for a moment before nodding. He took out the cleaver from his backpack, and then removed the grey cloth wrapped around it. The red setting sun shone down from the hole above and landed on the kitchen knife, causing it to shine with a dazzling brilliance. Wow! Everyone squinted their eyes subconsciously, and then let out a heartfelt exclamation. A master was a master indeed. They couldn't see anything with the flash of the cleaver, and their eyes were almost blinded. Everyone has seen it. Goodbye. Meg put away the cleaver, and carried Amy to the carriage. After getting on the carriage, Meg and Godalla had dinner together, and then went back to Tamin to get their luggage. They bid farewell to Godalla at the entrance of the inn. Brother Meg, I'm happy for you that you can get a cleaver made by Master Rome. However, I saw that some of those people looked unfriendly. You have to be careful when you leave tonight. I don't have anything to give you. You can ride the white unicorn in the stable, and don't stop after you leave Isen Castle. As long as they don't have flying mounts, they shouldn't be able to catch up to you. Godalla approached Meg, and lowered his voice. Chapter 1178. A strange look flashed across Meg's eyes, and he felt a little touched as he looked at Godalla. He had already noticed those unfriendly gazes, and a few of them had followed them all the way here. They were staring at them from a short distance away. However, he didn't expect Godalla to notice those people too, and guess what they were thinking? It was already very rare for Godalla to bring them into the city yesterday, and to be their guide today. Now, he was even prepared to give him his fastest unicorn so that he could shake off those fellows' pursuit. Meg was a little touched by his friendship. Everyone said that merchants valued profits, but Godalla had overturned his impression of them. It's all right. Don't worry, brother Godalla. I've also made some arrangements. They won't be able to catch up with me. Meg shook his head with a smile. He naturally wasn't worried that anyone would follow them. Furthermore, parting with Godalla here was also a show for those fellows to see, so that they wouldn't find trouble with Godalla. But Godalla still had a worried look on his face. Master Rome has arranged the itinerary for me, Meg said softly. Godalla's eyes lit up with realization. Master Rome's words carried a lot of weight in Isen Castle. With his arrangements, Meg and the rest naturally wouldn't have a problem leaving safely. He nodded with a smile and said, since that's the case, hurry up and set off. Be careful on the road. All right. Come and find me in Chaos City when you have time, brother. I've opened a restaurant in Aiden Square called Amy's. You can ask around in Chaos City. Meg bade farewell. He held Amy's little hand and walked along the street. In the gradually darkening night, a few black figures flashed past from different directions. Father, are there people following us? Amy turned back to take a look. Yes. There are a few little tails following us. Meg nodded with a smile. Ugly Duckling shook its head left and right, and then retracted its head in boredom. It snuggled in Amy's arms again, and closed its eyes. Little tail, should we get rid of them? Amy asked eagerly. Let's wait until we leave Isen Castle. It's not good to fight here. Meg shook his head. He picked up Amy and quickened his pace. Walking along the long street, the sky was completely dark. Meg took out the head-mounted flashlight he bought from the system and turned it on, illuminating the road ahead. What's that? Why is his head glowing? The few figures who were pursuing Mag suddenly stopped in their tracks and looked at Mag, who had a bright light above his head. That beam of white light was exceptionally bright in the darkness. However, when he saw Meg's figure disappearing into the distance, his obsession to obtain the kitchen knife had completely overtaken his rationality. He quickly chased after him. After walking for almost half an hour, Meg left Isen Castle and walked towards the valley along the snow-covered road. A few black figures darted out of Isen Castle and continued to follow behind at a distance. There were also 2 flying steeds. They used the darkness of the night to cover their tracks and stared at the father and daughter walking unhurriedly below. With that bright beam of light as a guide, they did not have to worry about losing track of them. They were obviously not the same group of people, but they had the same goal. Therefore, there would definitely be a battle between them tonight. However, this battle would start when the kitchen knife was in their hands. Although everyone was vigilant against each other, they only maintained a certain distance, and were not in a hurry to attack. Isen Castle had its rules. No one was allowed to attack Isen Castle's guests within a 10-kilometer radius of Isen Castle. Otherwise, they would become Isen Castle's enemy. If this human chef kept hiding in Isen Castle, it would be quite a headache. However, he left Isen Castle with the kitchen knife, and was undoubtedly the most desirable target. The beam of light climbed up the hill, and then walked towards the valley. It had already reached the 10-kilometer distance. A cold glint appeared in the eyes of the people following behind. That valley was where they would attack. However, just as the beam of light reached the valley, it suddenly disappeared. With the disappearance of the beam of light, the valley was instantly plunged into darkness. The large and small figures also disappeared. Not good. Someone shouted, and turned into a black shadow and rushed towards the valley. The 2 flying steeds that had been following in the sky also swooped down. Although they did not think that a human could escape from under their eyes, if the kitchen knife fell into the hands of others, it would not be so easy to get it back. In the blink of an eye, the 8 figures that had followed out of the city entered the valley almost at the same time. The long and narrow valley was pitch black. Other than the snow, it was empty everywhere. There was no sign of the father and daughter. Where did they go? Everyone was shocked. They had clearly seen the beam of light enter the valley. Where could they hide in the blink of an eye? 2 8th tier, 3 7th tier, and 3 6th tier. These fellows are really greedy. Meg stood at the edge of the cliff above the valley with Amy in his arms. He looked down at the dumbfounded people below. Then, he casually threw down the light stick wrapped in a black cloth in his hand and shouted, "The kitchen knife is here." The light stick shone with a golden light in the darkness. It faintly passed through the black cloth and drew a beautiful parabola before falling into the crowd. The kitchen knife. The eyes of the people in the valley immediately lit up. Almost at the same time, they reached out to the black cloth. An iron-armed goshawk swooped down and grabbed the black cloth with its claws. The knight sitting on the iron-armed goshawk's back was ecstatic. However, before the iron-armed goshawk could soar again, an orc had already jumped high and grabbed the iron-armed goshawk's wings. With a rip, he tore off the iron-armed goshawk's wings. Blood splattered everywhere. The knight fell from the eagle, and the light stick wrapped in the black cloth flew high again. Seems like we don't have to do anything. Mag retracted his gaze from the intense battle that had just started. Go, little fireball. However, before he could finish speaking, the huge purple-gold fireball in Amy's hand had already smashed into the crowd below with a long tail. As a mushroom cloud rose, the valley on both sides shook. Countless amounts of snow rushed down at the same time. "Okay, Amy, we should go." Meg looked at Amy, who had casually created a huge avalanche, and smiled helplessly. The weakest of these people was an expert above 6th tier. Naturally, they did not have to worry about being crushed to death by the avalanche. However, the situation would definitely become more chaotic. Meg whistled. RZ flew over from afar. Carrying Meg and Amy, they disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1179. This bitter struggle for the kitchen knife lasted until the latter half of the night before it ended. When Hayden dug out the divine cleaver wrapped in black cloth from the snow with a surprised expression, and pulled out a dim glow stick with a solemn expression, the 7 miserable-looking powerhouses howled into the sky at the same time, and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. "Fuck you." Hayden cursed into the sky. On the other side, Meg had already brought Amy back to the restaurant. He took a comfortable hot bath, and was about to go to bed. "Mr. Meg, the High Priest has found a way to connect Lantiste and Amy's." Gina, who was guarding the bathroom door in her school uniform, pounced on Meg as soon as he came out of the bathroom. She stood in front of Meg, and said delightedly, "Oh." Meg was a little surprised to hear that. He didn't expect Lantiste to find a solution so quickly. Previously, Mr. Mag gave over 100 Lantiste warriors the ability to breathe in the outside world, so the High Priest asked them to explore in the direction of Chaos City without disturbing the other species. He opened up an underwater passageway that allowed them to travel from Lantiste's sea to Chaos City's moat. "It only took 3 days for a round trip," Gina said. "Although it's slower than using a flying steed, it's pretty good to be able to travel in a way that doesn't attract the attention of other tribes." Meg nodded. The intelligence of a tribe was indeed not to be underestimated, especially for a tribe like Lantiste that was once prosperous. In the future, the #1 warrior of Lantiste will send shark's fin to the restaurant every 3 days to ensure the restaurant's shark's fin supply, Gina said with a smile. Meg looked at Gina in surprise when he heard that someone else was going to send shark's fin. He asked, then, "Gina, are you going back?" "No. I can't bear to leave Mr. Meg and everyone else." Gina shook her head, and grabbed Meg's arm with a sweet smile. "I want to stay in the restaurant with Mr. Meg and everyone else." "This," Meg muttered to himself. He was a little worried that Irina would beat him to death on the spot when she returned. "Mr. Meg, you don't want Gina to stay?" Gina looked at Meg anxiously. "No, Gina is an excellent employee. She can make the children who come to the cafeteria obedient. If you are willing to stay, I would be more than happy to oblige." Meg quickly shook his head. "I will continue to work hard." A smile appeared on Gina's face. She opened her arms and hugged Meg. Then, she turned around and walked towards her room. When she reached the door, she stopped and looked at Meg. "If Mr. Meg can't sleep, you can come and find me anytime." Cough. Meg was almost choked to death by his own saliva. What was this girl talking about in the middle of the night? "I have slept for a long time today. If you can't sleep either, you can come and chat with me anytime," Gina added with a smile. Gina added smilingly. Then, she waved at Mag like a kitten with her little paw and went back into the room. "It's late. Let's sleep." Meg walked past Gina's room with a straight face. He lay down on the bed and fell asleep in no time. Speaking of which, Mr. Mac didn't ask for leave today, did he? "I missed him so much that I couldn't sleep last night. I really can't miss him for even a day. Uncle, please be more reserved." "Haha. I didn't expect there to be a man among my opponents. Public morals are degenerating day by day." There were many customers at Mammy's door early in the morning. Mr. Mac suddenly asked for leave yesterday, and many people were craving for food. "The notice for leave is still here. I wonder if Mr. Mac is back," Harrison, who was in front of the line, said with a melancholy expression. "The cleaners didn't come for breakfast this morning, either. It looked like the restaurant was going to be closed again. It was really melancholy to not open for 3 days in a row." It was 7:30 a.m. It was the usual opening time. There was still no movement in the restaurant, so the customers had no choice but to leave. Meg slept all the way until 9 a.m. this time. He made up for the sleep that he had only gotten back in the latter half of the night yesterday. "I feel a little guilty for asking for leave for one more day." Meg sat up from the bed. Amy, who was on the small bed at the side, also sat up. She turned to look at Meg pitifully, and said, "Father, I woke up because I was hungry this morning." Meow Tilda Ugly Duckling, who was standing on the floor, put its 2 front paws on the end of the bed and stared at Meg. "Then, let's invite our little Amy to get up. Father will make something nice for you to eat," Meg said with a smile. He got up and took a cute red and black gothic lowly dress for Amy from the cupboard. He also put on a small black cloak over it. Amy raised her little hand, and said, "I want to tie my hair into a nice bun today." "A bun?" "Sure." Meg nodded. He took out a black rubber band from the small box, and combed Amy's hair. His fingers nimbly coiled it, and then tied it with the rubber band. A very perfect little bun was formed. "Take a look." Meg handed the mirror to Amy. "Wow, what a pretty little bun. I want to eat it," Amy said happily. Then, she jumped up from the bed and hugged Meg's neck. She smiled, and said, "I have an omnipotent father. I have a super cute little baby." Meg carried Amy with a smile. He helped her put on her little leather boots, and then walked to the bathroom. After washing up, he went downstairs. Gina was wiping the tables and chairs carefully with a rag. She looked at the stairs when she heard the noise. She saw Meg walking down the stairs with one hand holding Amy, who was hanging on his neck, and the other hand holding Ugly Duckling, who had curled up into a ball. There was a gentle smile on his angular face. So warm Tilda Gina's eyes lit up immediately. Mr. Meg always made her feel at ease and comfortable. "Gina, you haven't had breakfast, either, right?" Meg asked Gina with a smile, who was in a daze. "Ah, yes, I haven't eaten yet, but I'm not hungry." Gina was stunned for a moment, and then quickly shook her head. "Grumble." As soon as she finished her sentence, her stomach made a series of grumbling sounds, and her face turned red immediately. "Big sister Gina is lying. Your stomach is saying that it's very hungry," Amy said with a smile as she slid down from Meg's body. "Sit down and wait. I'll go make breakfast for you." "I'll make breakfast," Meg said with a smile. He put Ugly Duckling on the counter, took the apron hanging by the door, and tied it around his waist before going into the kitchen. Today's breakfast was a plate of Yangju fried rice for each of them. The mild fried rice soothed their hungry stomachs, and also made a new day full of energy. After breakfast, Meg said with a smile, "The restaurant is not open today. Let's go to the ice cream shop." Chapter 1180. Due to the closure of Amy's, there was an ice cream shop that had a peak flow of customers. Ice cream was originally the perfect food for summer. In the cold winter, people were not even willing to stretch their hands out, let alone eat food related to ice. However, during this period of time, the temperature in an ice cream shop had risen a lot. It was so warm that the first thing people did when they entered the shop was to take off their jackets. Sitting in the warm ice cream shop for a while and having a sweet ice cream was a very comfortable feeling. Therefore, other than children, it also attracted many young people and young couples. Business is unexpectedly good, Meg said in surprise as he looked at the ice cream shop that was full of customers. Yes, MIA is very good. Gina gave a thumbs up as she looked at MIA, who was busy in the ice cream shop, with admiration. Meg saw many of Amy's regulars among the customers, so he smiled and said, "You guys go in." "Father, aren't you going in?" Amy looked at Meg strangely. "Yes, I still have something to do. When I'm done, I'll come back to have lunch with you guys. Tell Sister MIA and the others that we'll go back to the restaurant for lunch today," Meg said with a smile. "Okay." Amy nodded and walked toward the ice cream shop with Gina. Meg reached out to hail a carriage carrying passengers and headed to the Buffett Manor. "Is Miss Hill in?" Meg asked the gatekeeper at the entrance of the Buffett Manor. "Do you have an appointment?" The gatekeeper looked at Meg cautiously, but he still maintained his respect and poise. "No." Meg shook his head. The gatekeeper smiled and said, "Then please come back after making an appointment. Miss Hill has already left today. She never meets customers who don't have an appointment." He had to receive dozens of people like Meg every day. They would ask to see Miss Hill the moment they opened their mouths, but Miss Hill didn't want to see them at all. Besides, this fellow came here in a carriage. He didn't even have a carriage, so how could he know Miss Hill? "I see," Meg muttered. Hill had to manage such a large family and company. His schedule must be very full. His sudden visit was indeed a little thoughtless. He was about to leave. "Mr. Meg, why are you here?" At this time, a voice sounded from the manor, and a young man walked out quickly. It was Mr. Hill's assistant, who had taken Meg to the train station twice before. "I have something to discuss with Miss Hill, but I didn't make an appointment in advance. It seems that I'll have to come again next time," Meg said with a smile. The assistant smiled and said, "Miss Hill told us that you are the first-in-line partner. If you want to see Miss Hill, I can take you to her now. I think she will be happy to see you." "First in line?" The gatekeeper at the side opened his mouth wide and looked at Meg in disbelief. As far as he knew, Miss Hill's first-in-line partners included the master, the mayor, and the lord of the Grey Temple, and this ordinary-looking man was also on Miss Hill's first-in-line partner list. "Okay." Meg nodded. He was no stranger to the first-in-line partner list. The more valuable a partner was, the higher their priority. It seemed that Miss Hill valued him quite a bit. "Please wait a moment. I'll ask them to send the carriage over," the assistant said respectfully. He turned around and went back to the manor. Soon, a coachman drove out a luxurious carriage pulled by 4 pure white unicorns and stopped beside Meg. "Mr. Meg, please get in." The assistant opened the door. "Thank you." Meg got into the carriage. The assistant closed the door and sat down beside Meg. The carriage moved smoothly, and he didn't ask anything during the whole process. "Please wait a moment." The horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of a Buffett bank. The assistant got out of the carriage and came back in a short while. He opened the door, and respectfully said, "Mr. Mag, Miss Mag invites you. Please come with me." "Okay." Meg got out of the carriage and followed the assistant into the bank. They passed through the lobby and came to the VIP room on the 2nd floor. "Mr. Meg, I heard that you were looking for me. What can I do for you?" The Hill was standing by the window. She turned around and smiled at Meg. "Yes, I went to Isen Castle 2 days ago and met Master Rome. I have a business deal to discuss with Miss Hill." Meg smiled and nodded. Although it wasn't the first time he met Miss Hill, he still felt that he had to be alert in front of her every time he saw this young girl dressed only in red. "I just heard this morning that Master Rome, who hasn't made a new dish for a long time, forged a cleaver for a chef yesterday. Could that mysterious chef be Mr. Meg? The Hill looked at Meg in surprise. Miss Hill, you are indeed well informed. Also, you are smarter than others. Meg nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Mr. Meg, you always do something unexpected. I really can't figure out what kind of person you are. The Hill looked at Meg with a smile, and said, however, other than you, there is no other chef on the Norland continent who can make Master Rome forge a cleaver for him. Miss Hill, you flatter me, Meg said politely. You can leave first. Don't let anyone in, Miss Hill instructed the assistant who was standing respectfully at the door. Yes. The assistant responded, turned around, and left the room, closing the door behind him. A soundproof spell formation lit up, and shrouded the VIP room. May I know what business Mr. Meg would like to discuss with me today? Could it be related to Master Rome? Miss Hill asked Meg with a smile as she stared into his eyes. Master Rome was the #1 blacksmith on the Norland continent. He had been famous for 400 years, and no one could surpass him. It was estimated that the wealth he had accumulated over the past 400 years was more than billions of copper coins. Such a rich person was naturally at the forefront of Buffett Bank's target customers. Yes. I spoke to Master Rome yesterday, and he said that he was willing to move his workshop to Chaos City. He was troubled by the inconvenience of moving his wealth, so I recommended Miss Hill's Buffett Banks to him. Meg nodded, and went straight to the point. Miss Hill narrowed her eyes. She didn't expect Meg to be so magnanimous. She then smiled, and said, I didn't expect Mr. Meg to find a suitable cleaver for himself, and even get such a big customer for our bank. How should I thank you? Miss Hill should have a good relationship with the goblins. I wonder if you can get them to help the night elves secretly? Meg asked Miss Hill. Night elves? Miss Hill squinted her eyes, and said to Meg, Mr. Meg, are you doing this for Princess Irina? Chapter 1181. Princess Irina. Meg was slightly taken aback before he shook his head with a smile. I don't know her. Since it's not for Princess Irina, then why is Mr. Meg so concerned about the night elves? The Hill was still staring into Meg's eyes. I wonder if Miss Hill has any impression of my restaurant service staff, Aisha, Shirley, and Firis? Meg asked in return. The Hill pondered for a while, and said, Mr. Meg, are you talking about those 3 elven service staff? Yes. Meg nodded. Ever since Princess Irina officially announced the establishment of the Night Elves in Chaos City, they left the restaurant one after another to join the Night Elves. It was also because of this that I learned more about the elves and the Night Elves. As a boss who had worked with them before, I would like to give them some help. I didn't expect those 3 elven ladies to join the Night Elves. The Hill was a little surprised. She looked at Meg with more understanding in her eyes. Mr. Meg was indeed a mysterious person. However, from the understanding of various parties and their interactions during this period of time, he was indeed a kind person. It wasn't hard to understand why he would want to help the Night Elves just because of 3 employees who had worked in the restaurant before. They are fighting for the freedom of the elves. I have no right to stop them. Meg nodded. Fighting for freedom is indeed a very moving reason. The Hill nodded slightly. She looked at Meg and solemnly said, however, this is an internal elven war with the intention of overthrowing the Wind Forest's rule over the elves. Any interference from outside forces could be seen as an enemy by the Wind Forest. Buffett Banks operates in the entire Norland continent. It has never participated in any political affairs, and focuses on business. That's why it has been able to maintain a neutral and expanding stance. I sympathize with the Night Elves, but I'm afraid I can't make any promises to Mr. Meg regarding this matter. Meg and the Hill looked at each other for a few seconds before retracting their gazes. He was slightly disappointed as he said, it seems like I have made things difficult for Miss Hill. I hope Mr. Meg can understand, the Hill said apologetically. However, since Buffett Banks doesn't participate in any political affairs, then why are they so actively promoting the use of steam locomotives? Meg looked up at the Hill with a smile. Buffett Banks is all over the Norland continent in order to build a huge financial empire using stable and reliable and stable currency as a foundation. And all of this is based on the Norland continent's stability and order. Stability. Once a full-scale war broke out, or a local war expanded, causing widespread chaos, the first to collapse would be the monetary system. Buffett Bank would lose its stable cornerstone, and the empire would naturally collapse. Therefore, I believe that Buffett Bank is the one on the Norland continent that wishes for the current state of affairs the most. Am I right, Miss Hill? The Hill looked at Meg. He was just an ordinary restaurant owner, but his vision and insight had already surpassed many people who stood at the top of Chaos City. He actually saw through Buffett Bank's predicament at one glance. Just like what Meg had said, Buffett Banks seemed to be prosperous, but they were actually standing on the edge of life and death. The outcome of the peace talks between the 8 races and one city in a month's time would determine the future of the Norland continent. At the same time, it would also determine whether the Buffett family's financial empire would continue to expand or collapse. Mr. Meg's foresight is indeed very unique. However, the Buffett family has been in business for decades. They won't be destroyed so easily, the Hill said calmly. Meg looked at the Hill with a slight smile, and said, without Buffett Banks, the Buffett family can only compete with Family Morton and the Marquis family in Chaos City. I don't think that's what Miss Hill wants. Even the position of president of the Aden Chamber of Commerce is nothing more than a piece of candy in Miss Hill's eyes. She's just suddenly interested in it. This guy. The Hill's eyes narrowed slightly. She felt as if she had been completely seen through. Her goal was naturally not Chaos City. The territory that her parents had opened up was no longer attractive to her. Her goal was the vast world outside. It was a pity that she was born at the wrong time. She had only just taken over the Buffett family, and the world was about to fall into chaos. However, Mag could see through all of this so clearly. Who exactly was this man? His astonishing culinary skills and his groundbreaking inventions were enough for him to be crowned as a prodigy. Furthermore, the vision and knowledge that he was displaying now made her even more curious. What do you think, Mr. Meg? The Hill tacitly agreed with Meg's words, and asked sincerely. She was rather curious about Meg's motive for saying all of this. I also hate war. I don't like a chaotic world, and I don't want the Norland continent to fall back into the chaos caused by the racial war 100 years ago. Meg looked at the Hill with a smile, and said, in this regard, I agree with Miss Hill. The outcome of the peace talks is no longer something that you and I can control. I'm not sure how much the steam locomotive can change the situation. The Hill shook her head with a hint of loneliness in her eyes. This powerful and shrewd woman in the eyes of outsiders also had times when she couldn't do as she wished. Mag looked at she, and extended his right hand as he said, I want to do everything I can to help this world that is about to descend into chaos. However, I need a powerful ally so that we can protect more innocent people together. The Hill looked at Meg's outstretched hand, and then looked up at Meg. She didn't extend her hand, and seriously said, before we form an alliance, I need to make sure that you are also a strong ally. A very wise answer. Meg retracted his hand, and took out a map of the Norland continent from his pocket. He laid it flat on the table, and then took out a pen. This is. The Hill stood beside the table, and looked at the map with confusion. The map was a simplified one, and only marked the rough boundaries of each race's territory. This is a simplified map of the Norland continent. According to some books that I've read in my spare time over the past few years, I've sorted out the current situation of the Norland continent. Meg picked up the pen, and started sketching on the almost blank map. Now, the Norland continent is divided into 8 races and one city. Among them, the giant dragons are the super powerful race, and their strength is above all the other races. The dwarfs are the weakest, and they are a neutral and conservative race. Chaos City is the most special. It is the product of the peace treaty after the racial war. After 100 years of development, its strength can already be ranked 7th among all the major powers on the Norland continent. It is stronger than the dwarfs and goblins. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.